ready, Jean? Okay. They're all here. Okay, thank you so much for your patience. I apologize for our tardiness. We were discussing some very important items in exec, and we ran a little over. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and call the governing board meeting to order. Can I ask for a roll call to establish quorum, please?
Yes. Dr. Gravosa?
Here.
Ms. Luna Rose?
Here.
Ms. Shaw?
Here.
Ms. Counts?
Here.
Ms. Grijalva?
Here. And we're on to land acknowledgement, and we have Melinda Flores. Is Melinda with us?
I'm sorry, Ms. Grijalva, she had difficulty joining. She's not here.
Okay. Dr. Trujillo, could you read our land acknowledgement statement for us?
Absolutely. It would be my pleasure.
Thank you.
Okay. On behalf of the governing board of the Tucson Unified School District, I, Gabriel Trujillo, acknowledge that the schools and buildings and facilities of the Tucson Unified School District reside on the ancestral homeland of the Tohono-O'odham Nation and the federally recognized tribal land of the Pascua Yaqui tribe.
Thank you, Dr. Trujillo. I would like to ask the governing board staff if we can connect with Melinda for our next board meeting. If she could join us. I wanted to thank her for her willingness to join us, and we'll figure out how to get her connected.
Yes, we will.
Thank you. Next, we have the Pledge of Allegiance. Do we have Amelia Warrior? Is it Amelia or Amelia?
Amelia.
Amelia. Thank you for joining us, Amelia. I'm going to talk a little bit about you and brag about you a little bit, okay? So, Amelia is a 5th grader at Steele Elementary School, and she has attended TUSD schools beginning in kindergarten. She has been a student at Sewell Elementary and Steele Elementary. Amelia has participated in cross country at Sewell. She now plays the trumpet and is the community service coordinator for the Steele Student Council. Amelia is honored to, are you honored to represent Steele today? We're honored to have you here.
Of course.
Thank you so much for joining us, and I appreciate your patience. Can you lead us in the pledge, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate your patience, and please thank your family on our behalf for encouraging you to join us tonight. Enjoy 5th grade. Where are you going to middle school?
I don't really know yet. I'm kind of voting for Grizzly.
Yay! Well, you have a lot of really
Right.
great options.
That's
So
great.
we look forward to seeing you in 6th grade. Thank you. Okay, Dr. Trujillo, agenda adjustments.
Yes, Board President Grijalva, members of the governing board, I'd like to recommend the following items to be adjusted and moved to immediately following the call to the audience. First up, we have guests from the Pima County Health Department here tonight, so I'd like to recommend 7.1, and then item 7.3, and item 8.1 in that order.
Okay, so 7.1, 7.3, and 8.1.
Yes.
Okay. Board members, any opposition to moving that, making those adjustments? Okay. Thank you. Now we're on to superintendent report. Dr. Trujillo.
Yes. I will share my screen momentarily. Welcome back, Tucson Unified Community. And this is our first meeting here in November as we rapidly approach the Thanksgiving holiday. So a couple of very, very important items to update the community tonight. First, tonight, you will see the annual presentation of the district's 40th day enrollment report. Just a couple of highlights just to get you ready for the agenda coming a little bit later, the agenda item coming a little bit later in tonight's meeting. Overall, when you compare the 40th day of the school year to this school year, 21-22, to the 40th day of the school year last year, we have 387 more students, so that is very, very good news. And in our presentation, we'll talk about the difference between the average enrollment across 40 days of time and actual enrollment on a day-by-day basis, two very, very important numbers when talking about the 40th day. This increase, I want to remind everybody in the community, is inclusive of our kindergarten students, and we know that until the legislature takes action, we will continue to receive half the funding that we receive from all other grade levels for kindergarten students. The district saw its greatest gains in 9 through 12. Our high schools brought in an additional 520 students, and we successfully recovered 50% of the decline that we saw at the kindergarten level during the pandemic year. So some really, really good highlights for enrollment. The big news this evening, late last week, the foremost regulatory agency for the workplace in the United States, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, issued its emergency temporary standard for COVID-19 vaccination and testing for all employers that have 100 employees or more. This is inclusive of school districts, as the state of Arizona does have an OSHA-approved state plan that is applicable to both private sector organizations as well as local government employees, which is inclusive of district employees. Under the emergency temporary standard, the district is going to have two options for compliance. First option is to allow employers to mandate the COVID-19 vaccine for all employees as a condition of employment with certain limited exemptions. The other option would be to allow for employees to either get the vaccine or to subject themselves to weekly COVID-19 testing throughout the district. The effective date of the emergency temporary standard is the date of its publication in the Federal Register, which was late last week, November 5th. The district at this point has 30 days to approve and begin implementing a policy of compliance with all but one of the provisions in the emergency temporary standard, and that would be December 5th. But the compliance date for the mandatory testing provision, should the board opt to go that route for employees that are unvaccinated, would be January 4th, 2022. Occupational Safety Health Administration Emergency Temporary Standard requires employees to offer paid time off for the employees to get the vaccine and to recover from any side effects that would be associated. Our governing board, of course, will be taking up this matter at an upcoming meeting yet to be determined. Late last week, the Arizona Supreme Court ruled in favor of the local autonomy enjoyed by our local elected officials, particularly our school board members right here in TUSD. The court ruled the provision of Arizona's K-12 budget banning mask mandates in K-12 schools to be unconstitutional. This ruling was consistent with an earlier ruling from the Maricopa County Superior Court, also deeming the provision to be contrary to Arizona's Constitution. Both rulings support the Tucson Unified School District's continued policy of mandatory mask usage for all students, employees, guests, visitors, and vendors to district schools, buildings, and facilities. Expectations for mask compliance and accountability measures for students and staff were reviewed with our principals and our teachers last week. Last week, I had the opportunity to convene our new Transportation Advisory Committee consisting of parents, and we had a very, very productive first meeting. The committee, our first night, established the goal of establishing guiding principles to be utilized by the district when planning routes and services before they're changed. Guiding principles such as every child in the district that qualifies for transportation should receive a spot on one of our buses. Guiding principles like routes, the overarching goal should be for every route plan to put that route as close as possible to the child's home. Establishing a overarching goal like the third one we discussed, when planning routes, we should do everything possible to plan routes that are the least possible routes that could be intrusive upon a parent's work schedule. So we were very, very happy to get those suggestions from our parents, and we're going to continue to work with them to memorialize a set of values collective commitments that will guide our planning for the upcoming school year with regard to routes. The committee also set December 21's working session as the time that we will be reviewing our recommendations from the consultant Transpar, specifically regarding route improvements that may necessitate bell schedule changes to some of our schools. It is absolutely crucial that our parents are at the table when talking about bell schedule changes, specifically start times and departure times from schools, given their impact on our parents' work schedules. And at this past November working session, the committee provided feedback on such changes, on the impact of bell schedules across the district, and were very clear with its feedback that if their local schools are going to experience changes to bell schedules, particularly at the point of entry, the arrival time, and the departure time, our parents' expectation is that we significantly expand on-site child care options at the affected schools. That's definitely something that we are going to be taking into consideration with budget as we continue to build for the 22-23 school year. And before I conclude my report, I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the unfortunate passing of two Tucson Unified School District community members who have proudly served our district as our employees and unfortunately have passed on. First, I'd like to take this opportunity to, on behalf of the Tucson Unified School District and our employees, offer our condolences, our best wishes to the family of Aaron Hornbuckle and to the Booth-Thicket community. Mr. Hornbuckle proudly served the Booth-Thicket K-8 community as its assistant principal for the last several years. He was a champion for students. He was a champion for safety on that campus and for excellence in teaching and learning. I will fondly remember all of my visits to Booth-Thicket. You could very rarely find Mr. Hornbuckle anywhere but surrounded by kids. It definitely was the premier focus of his passion in life, as well as his family. Mr. Hornbuckle, we will always remember him as a shining example of the passion of our educators here at TUSD. Just this week, also, we received word of the passing of a longtime teacher assistant out at John B. Wright, another shining light in the Tucson Unified School District. Nadifu Yusuf dedicated herself to the service of one of the district's largest refugee populations and an A-rated school of excellence. And what we know about John B. Wright is that every single educator on that campus is singular in its mission and its focus to dedicate the best of themselves to children, and Nadifa was no exception. She will be fondly remembered as a child advocate and as somebody who brought joy and happiness to the John B. Wright community day after day. I'd like to take this opportunity to observe a moment of silence for our two fallen staff members. President Grijalva, members of the board, that concludes the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Dr. Trujillo. And our thoughts and prayers go out to the Booth-Thicket and Wright communities and to the family and friends of both Nadifu and Aaron. Now we're on to call to the audience. And so if I can ask Clerk Shaw to read the guidelines for call to the audience, please.
Thank you, Ms. Grijalva. During the audience call, the board clerk will recognize speakers and maintain order by setting appropriate limitations. The governing board is committed to the safety of the entire TUSD community. In order to observe the recommended safeguards for reducing the rate of spread of COVID-19, the following procedures related to the call to the audience portion of board meetings will be observed. All public comments for the meeting were accepted in written form. Public comments will be read into the record by the program coordinator of staff services to the governing board. Our staff will make sure each board member receives a copy. And at the conclusion of the call to the audience, the governing board president will ask if individual board members wish to respond to criticism made by those who have addressed the board wish to ask staff to review a matter, or wish to ask that a matter be put on a future agenda. By law, at most 2 board members can address any single issue raised during the call to the audience. And our first letter is from Angelica Garcia.
I would like to address if you guys will be pushing the COVID-19 shot on us parents for ages 5 to 11 if it gets required. If you guys will mandate the COVID-19 shot for 5 to 11 of age, are you guys prepared for all of the parents to take students of school? If you do pass to mandate it, are you guys aware of the executive order form? Angelica Garcia.
Thank you. And the next letter is from Jennifer Sprung.
Dear governing board members, board chair, and superintendent, a student was suspended for 10 days for phone use infractions. 2 TUSD school staff, by written admission and recorded evidence, did surreptitious recordings and illegal eavesdropping in the workplace, a criminal act when both are not a party to the conversation, yet received no discipline. Instead, both received added duty benefits as reward. Principal was knowledgeable and aware of violations of policy and law and took no action. A TUSD staff member who was illegally recorded received punitive discipline and was denied the opportunity to grieve by the district, yet another violation of policies. Central leadership was apprised of the criminal conduct and took no action. ARS 15-514 reads in part, B, the superintendent of a school district or the chief administrator of a charter school who reasonably suspects or receives a reasonable allegation that an act of immoral or unprofessional conduct that would constitute grounds for dismissal or criminal charges by a certificated or non-certificated person has occurred shall report the conduct to the State Board of Education. It is duty to preserve moral agency and just conduct. Practices in TUSD should be equitable and fair for all persons. No person is above the law. Thank you. Respectfully submitted, Jennifer Sprung.
Thank you. And next is Ariana Montes.
Hello. We are a student-led public health advocacy group at the University of Arizona, and we are focusing on addressing childhood obesity in Tucson. We have some questions we would like to ask the board. Some of us will be in attendance watching the board meeting tomorrow afternoon and look forward to hearing these questions be addressed. What programs does TUSD currently have that addresses childhood obesity? How much funding has been set aside by the district to address childhood obesity? How active are these programs? This question comes from the Let's Move campaign and how there has not been a lot of public attention that when it first was implemented. Finally, what information has been provided to parents for addressing childhood obesity? Thank you, Ari Montes.
Thank you. And next is Rick Gibson.
I am Rick Gibson, a senior investor for Sustainability Partners, a Chandler, Arizona infrastructure investor. Sustainability Partners is a national leader via its infrastructure as a service and electric vehicles as a service for public sector entities. We provide a month-to-month utility model. We fund projects via non-debt, meeting all the strict GASB, FASB standards. We have a capital pool of over $1 billion and over $500 million in projects underway with dozens of cities, states, schools, and hospitals across the country. Some better-known customers are LSU, Jacksonville University, states of Arizona, Louisiana, Mississippi, Georgia, and North Carolina. For the state of Hawaii, we're the exclusive supplier for e-vehicles and charging stations. The TUSD Facilities Master Plan says TUSD has over 8 million square feet of buildings that average 47 years old. Cuts in state funding more than $100 million over past 10 years left TUSD with outdated equipment, leaky roofs, broken heaters, and many more problems. This process identified over $500 million in school facility needs. It identified a bond as the only viable source of funding for the improvements needed. However, there is a really good alternative to bonds. Sustainability Partners could commit to the first $100 million quickly. This is all non-debt, requires zero of your capital dollars, and we do not add margins to contractor costs. We're open book and show you the numbers. We're supplier agnostic, promise to bring you lowest cost of usage over time and keep your equipment forever in state of good repair. As a collaborator with TUSD, we could fund your HVAC, electrical, water, lighting, solar, elevators, windows, doors, roofs, e-vehicles, and much more. Compared to ESCOs, contractors, vendors, lenders, leasers, etc., we reduce cost, attention, and risk. We would like an opportunity to show you how we could serve TUSD. Rick Gibson.
Thank you. And next is Sonia Tolson.
To the Superintendent of TUSD Schools, TUSD School Board President, TUSD School Board, and its administrative staff, regarding mandatory requirements to wear facial masks and/or COVID vaccine requirements in order to attend in-person public school. Mandating children wear face masks as a condition of being allowed to attend taxpayer-funded public school against the wishes of both the student and/or their parents or guardians infringes upon both their Arizona state and federal constitutional rights. I, Sonia Carr Tolson, one of the people of the state of Arizona, as seen in Article 2, Section 2 of the Arizona Constitution, am giving you this notice so that you and your agents provide due care. Arizona Constitution, Article 2, Section 1. Section 1, a frequent recurrence to fundamental principles is essential to the security of individual rights and the perpetuity of free government. As one of the people, it is my duty to frequently provide you with reminders of the fundamental principles of law so that my rights will not be violated. Arizona Constitution, Article 2, Section 3, Supreme Law of the Land. Section 3, Supreme Law of the Land, authority to exercise sovereign authority against federal action, use of government, personal, and financial resources. A, the Constitution of the United States is the supreme law of the land to which all government, state, and federal is subject. B, to protect the people's freedom and to preserve the checks and balances of the United States Constitution, this state may exercise its sovereign authority to restrict the actions of its personal and the use of its financial resources to purposes that are consistent with the Constitution. Arizona State Constitution, Article 11, Section 1A. Section 1A, the legislature shall enact laws as shall provide for the establishment and maintenance of a general and uniform public system, which system shall include 1, kindergarten schools, 2, common schools, 3, high schools, 4, normal schools, 5, industrial schools, 6, universities, which shall include an agricultural college, a school of mines, and such other technical schools as may be essential until such time as it may be deemed advisable to establish separate state institutions of such character. The legislature of the state of Arizona creates laws. These laws require compliance from all personnel to whom the law is addressed. In this case of school boards, the Department of Education, the state superintendent of instruction, or any other elected or appointed agent within the state, all must abide by the Arizona State Constitution and the Arizona Revised Statutes enacted by the legislature. ARS 15-10123, school district, means a political subdivision of this state with geographic boundaries organized for the purpose of the administration, support, and maintenance of the public schools or an accommodation school. All political subdivisions,
Ms.
public
Peña?
schools, districts...
Excuse me, Ms. Peña?
Yep.
The 3 minutes are up for this comment.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And then the next letter is from Greg Tolson.
Ms. Grijalva, this comment is exactly the same as the one that I just read. Do you want me to continue reading this one?
No, thank you.
Okay.
And the next letter is from Rosa Maria Mercado.
Dear Governing Board members, I am concerned. We heard that after Sabino High School had our Equity and Diversity Student Focus Groups last month, a 10-item list of issues was made up. Our concern is this list we heard about was meant for that public. We heard it's being blocked by site administration. Our family wants our principal to be upfront about this. Thank you, Rosa Maria Mercado.
Thank you. And the next letter is from Jean Kapusinski.
Dear board members, on October 13, 2021, document 2612 was filed in the U.S. District Court on behalf of the board and district. District's response to show cause regarding the district alternative education program. From beginning to end, the document is written with false and misleading statements and information. This is legal deception, a very serious matter and harmful to the district. Board members, false representation to the court on your behalf is unethical, unprofessional, and unacceptable, and it is incumbent upon the board to protect the interest and integrity of the district in this matter. Furthermore, the tone and tenor of the document is not befitting the response to the court, and the substance and meandering of the document does not address the concerns of the court, including these regarding date in school year 2022-23. The deceptions include false statements regarding enrollment data, number of teachers and staff, ACS staffing plan, previous date configurations and processes, current configuration, location and curriculum, the presence and use of social workers. Portions of the document are complete fabrications. The entire document with the accurate information added besides such false or misleading statement or datum is attached. The board and the district require and deserve trustworthy counsel and exemplary representation demonstrating impeccable character, standards, and professionalism. Sincerely, Jean Kapusinski.
Thank you. And the last letter is from Lillian Fox.
I have several questions. I hope they'll be answered. First, exactly how much are the various contracted transportation companies costing TUSD? Most are transporting very few students, which has to be expensive. What do parents have to do to get reimbursed for driving their children to school? In dollars and cents, how much do they get paid? A friend is driving her daughter to school 30 minutes each way every day. Nobody told her she was supposed to be paid. Obviously, the numbers of parents who are being paid is less than the total number who have to drive their children to school, because there still aren't bus routes. TUSD needs to follow AMFI's lead and reschedule schools' opening and closing time to make more efficient use of the bus drivers it does have. It's clear from the small numbers of drivers added and drivers in the pipeline, the hubs are here to stay. TUSD needs to make better use of the drivers it does have by following AMFI's example. By changing school start times and better scheduling, AMFI is transporting every eligible student using fewer bus drivers. Despite their shortage of bus drivers, AMFI never had to resort to hubs, paying parents, or outsourcing to transportation companies. TUSD transportation used to have sophisticated software. I have to wonder what has happened since then. The hub system was so poorly designed, it looked like it was designed on the back of an envelope. Hubs for some neighborhood schools were far away on the other side of Tucson. It shouldn't have been a surprise when those hubs had no riders. If TUSD doesn't have the expertise or the kind of GIS software that can optimize bus routes and school start times, it needs to pay a consultant to work with TUSD employees. With good routing and scheduling, GIS software, this is really not rocket science. TUSD will even save money because efficient routing and scheduling will reduce the number of drivers TUSD needs. Finally, it is misleading for TUSD to claim enrollment has increased by 500 students when it isn't counting the 282 student loss at the end of the first quarter. Including the 286 students who withdrew means enrollment has only increased by 183. It would be more helpful to the board and the public if staff compared TUSD's drop in enrollment during the pandemic to the relative change in enrollment of other TUSD districts or to comparable large districts like Mesa. Lillian Fox.
And that was the last letter, Ms. Grijalva.
Okay, thank you. Board members, any request to have staff look into an item? Or Dr. Trujillo, did you want to address any of those calls?
Yeah, regarding the potential change in bell schedules for transportation, I've spoken to that. And all of us here, having worked in TUSD, know that that is a very, very sensitive issue for parents, for teachers, for principals. It needs to be done throughout the course of this year so we can reach out to many stakeholder groups, our parents, our teachers, and our administrators. That's not something that you just drop on the TUSD community, that all of a sudden school bell schedules are going to change immediately. So as I mentioned during my report, we are engaged in that work now with our advisory group of parents and are looking forward to bringing future recommendations to the board.
Thank you. Any other? Okay. Oh, Ms. Shaw, go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, I would like staff to review the matter spoken by Ms. Sprung, also Mr. Gibson, and Ms. Mercado. Also, I want to say that I definitely unite with the concerns written out by Ms. Kapusinski, excuse me. I also saw many inconsistencies in the core documents that TUSD submitted compared to what I saw at DATE facilities. And, you know, I would like staff to review the matter that she discussed, but I would prefer that an impartial party could review what is happening at DAPE. Thank you.
And just as a follow-up regarding the comments by Mr. Gibson, if we can also forward Ms. Shaw and the rest of the board the communications about that organization that we received when we had a previous board member bring up that organization. Okay, thank you. All right, thank you for everyone who submitted a call to the audience. Now we are on consent agenda. Dr. Trujillo.
Oh, President Grijalva, we had our identified items.
Oh, I'm
from the
sorry.
agenda
I
adjustment.
was just going to do consent, but if we wanted to go ahead and go with those, that's fine. Item 7.1.
Yes, President Grijalva, members of the governing board. I would like to lead off by welcoming Mr. Brian Eller, who is here tonight representing the Pima County Health Department with a very, very important update. And then he'll be followed by our team members who'll give you an update about the compromise point that we have arrived at with our teachers regarding work that is to be completed by students that have to miss class due to COVID protocols. And then, of course, the third part of tonight's item is all yours, Governing Board. It is the review and potential approval of our plan to return to in-person Governing Board meetings, the operational plan that will be presented by our team here. So we'll get things started with Mr. Eller. Welcome back, sir.
Thank you all. Just a quick sound check. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, great. Thank you. I'll go ahead and do a share screen on the PowerPoint that I've sent ahead of time, unless there's one that can be pulled up on the TUSD side. So let me get started.
The share screen works. That's great.
Okay. And just want to...
Works. Great.
All right, great. So again, my name is Brian Eller. I'm with the Pima County Health Department COVID Schools Liaison Team. And tonight I'm just providing a couple of key bullet point updates for the TUSD School District. Again, I want to thank you all for allowing me to come out today and just provide another briefing. And most importantly, I just want to thank your staff again, especially your school health services professionals and your administrators, which again have just had an incredibly difficult time navigating this pandemic.
Mr. Eller. Sorry. I'm so sorry. Can you share your screen again, please? There we go. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
I think we're...
Is that coming up now?
Yes, now
Yes,
we're good.
perfect.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. All right, so some of the bullet points we're going to cover today are K through 5 vaccine availability, booster vaccine availability, recommendations for public and in-person gatherings, masks in schools, and the recommendation, along with scientific support for those recommendations, and an overview of COVID transmission trends in Pima County. I'll try to keep this as abbreviated as possible. So as of 11/4, we knew that Walgreens and CVS were accepting appointments for COVID vaccinations for 5 to 11-year-old booster or 5 to 11-year-old Pfizer shots. We've also looked at a lot of pediatric offices which have been providing the availability of that. At the time when this PowerPoint was created, we were expecting to have a lot of school clinics up and running. I am proud to announce that as of this Monday, we've been hosting 3 school sites a day every week for the next 3 weeks. And we have a couple of TUSD clinics coming up. Menlo Family Resource Center held one yesterday and holding another one this evening, concurrently occurring along with this meeting right now. Palo Verde Resource Center will be hosting a clinic on the 13th. Lynart Cadiz will be hosting one on the 16th, and the Southwest Family Resource Center on the 20th. I do have a call with Nikki Stefan and a couple of the other health services professionals to schedule out a couple of other elementary school sites within the next couple of weeks. So we will continue to work hand in hand with your health services and HR department to get those equitably distributed throughout the TUSD school sites. And we thank you for the partnership and the willingness to host those vaccine site clinics. In regards to the booster vaccine eligibility, I know it says at the bottom here that boosters are available at all vaccine sites. However, I need to bring a slight update to that. Our school sites will only be administering Pfizer. This is because of the high turnout that we've been having at our school sites. And we'll just be focusing on the 5 to 11 Pfizer, but we will also provide boosters for adults or first or second doses for 12 and over for those populations. Our other community sites like Tucson Indian Center and places like that will be hosting the full range of vaccines, but will not be providing pediatric doses. There is a risk, a significant liability risk associated with that, and that hence the decision that was made over just this last weekend in collaboration with our contractor, Precision Medical Group. So that's an important annotation to make. You'll find the updated vaccine sites along with that information on the pima.gov vaccine information website. If you have received a Pfizer, BioNTech, or Moderna, you are eligible to receive the booster vaccine if you have or meet any of these qualifying conditions. If you've received Johnson & Johnson's Janssen, same thing. You can get a Moderna or a Pfizer booster for any one of these. So for a lot of your staff who either received a full dose of Moderna or a full dose of J&J, they can receive the Pfizer booster, and they can receive those at any of the school sites that will be deploying vaccines at in collaboration with Tucson Unified School District. In regards to our recommendations for public and in-person gatherings, we have seen a very large increase in the number of cases. Just last week, our schools reported over 728 cases in total for just 1 week. That's far above our average, which is anywhere from 200 to 240 cases per week. We are still trying to figure out what's at the root of that. Although we have heard a lot of information being shared with us around Halloween parties and fall break social gatherings, birthday parties, things of that nature, which has led to what we believe the increased community transmission occurring along with that. We have also seen an increase in associated outbreaks with that as well, and our epidemiology team is really heavily investigating what's at the root cause of a lot of those things. So in general, we take that information and put that into the recommendations for public and in-person gatherings, which if you're unvaccinated, the rule is that you should really try to mask up as much as possible. And that's especially in indoor public spaces. Even if you are vaccinated, we do recommend that you wear a mask when gathering indoors with other people, trying to keep those gatherings to 10 people or less. In areas with high case numbers, always consider wearing a mask when in crowded outdoor settings. We've seen a couple of fall festivals and harvest fests where people moving around outdoors, not masking has led to an increase of cases. So we do recommend that if you've got a large amount of people in an outdoor setting, that you do wear a mask in those situations. If you are fully vaccinated, to maximize protection from the Delta variant, which 100% of the sequencing that we've done on the genomic variants has been Delta in the last couple of weeks. That's an important factor to know. We do recommend that you wear that mask indoors or when in substantial high transmission. regards to the masking in schools for recommendations and support, there's overall we're really recommending, sorry about that, indoor universal masking across the board. I want to applaud TUSD decisions that they made at the community in regards to that, standing strong. There's some articles which I'm going to just reference and just talk about some of the high points of these. So in order to make a case for why these articles are so important in terms of scientific literature, the MMWR, or the Mortality and Morbidity Weekly Report, is kind of like the gold standard for the CDC in terms of the scientific literature when it comes to either public health or epidemiological guidance. Epidemiology, of course, being the study of disease and transmission. There are 3 particular studies which I want to call out and provide some of the main bullet points on what those studies actually recommend in terms of masking in any kind of gathering, but these are all specifically related to schools. And the first one, Wood County, Wisconsin, this particular study found that schools requiring masking had 37% lower incidence of COVID-19 than the surrounding community. And one of the important factors with this is this was also co-occurring with higher rates of transmission in the community. So here what we're seeing is that masking reduced transmission in schools. In Salt Lake City, which is another study that came out, they found that high levels of mask wearing among students helped keep the rate of in-school spread of coronavirus to less than 1%, again, during periods of high community transmission. There was additional layered mitigation that was implemented in the Salt Lake City study, which included 3 to 6 feet distancing between desk spaces and in other activities that were conducted within that district. But again, the high-level bullet point is that mask wearing was a contributing factor to the reduction of transmission of COVID-19 in school settings. The last one, which was focused here in Pima and Maricopa County, and one of the most important points about this particular study is the sample size, which included 999 schools and represented a very large percentage of the state population of students, found that school districts without a mask requirement were 3.5 times more likely to experience an outbreak in a school setting than schools with implemented mask requirements early on in the pandemic, earlier than this year. So overall, the scientific literature, the consensus continues to support the fact that masking reduces the risk of outbreaks within school settings. If you'll excuse me, and I'm going to ask my family to just tone it down for just a quick minute during the dish.
We all have family. It's okay.
Thank you. We're quarantining and isolating at home, so there's a lot of energy going on here. I appreciate your patience with that.
Of course.
Okay. So the community trends for transmission. I mentioned earlier, we've seen a really high amount of cases in the last 2 weeks, and we continue to see that trend moving forward. We are really working hard with Partners in Health, which is a national organization that really has a strong background in research and epidemiological research to try and figure out what's going on exactly with the transmission right now in Pima County. But our schools cases continue to escalate in the last couple of weeks. The reason why you're seeing this drop right here is because the way that the reporting system works with MedSys is it typically takes anywhere from 7 to more days to get all of those cases synthesized from the state reports and built into the overall report card, which we have. So our estimate is that you are going to see this number jump up and climb continually throughout this MMWR week. When looking at the infection rates by age, the general thing that I'm just going to point out in this slide is that across the board, we're just seeing increases. The most drastic increase is within the age group of 0 to 11, which we all know as mostly our unvaccinated populations. And I'll show some information on that here in a minute and why that's pertinent. So the one thing that we can kind of capture from this is that vaccines are a really important method for reducing transmission, and we encourage children to get those vaccines because they're safe and effective. More than anything else, though, I would really encourage anyone listening to this to talk to your primary healthcare provider, your trusted healthcare provider, to find out their opinion or their consensus around it. Please do that. The breakdown of staff burden versus students, currently we're at 4,251 cases as reported as of last Thursday from this school year. In the entirety of last school year, we saw a total of 4,068 cases, or 4,069 cases. But I'll remind everyone that we were in remote and hybrid learning settings for the majority of that year. Staff students populate on this graph right here, which is very similar to the previous slide showing the breakdown of rates for COVID transmission across the board. And again, remember that these two last bars are probably going to jump up significantly over the next year or so. The next slide shows a breakdown in outbreak rates. Currently, we're sitting at 126 total outbreaks across Pima County, and I'll zoom on this a little. See the, let me adjust the slide just briefly. So we're sitting at 126 total outbreaks. There have been 82 classroom closures at this point, and I do want to talk about this just briefly. So a classroom closure will only be recommended collaboratively with either the school site or the local educational authority, whether that's a school district or a charter school administration or private school administration, when we see 10% of a classroom setting testing positive for COVID-19 with a confirmed laboratory COVID-19 test. So for the most part, that's usually represented by 3 or more cases within a 14-day period. That's when we'll review the mitigation strategies along with the administration of that school site and health services school site professionals to find out what's going on mitigation-wise with that classroom. Was student A sitting right next to student B? Was there interaction that took place outside of that classroom? Things of that nature. So we do conduct all of those epidemiological investigations hand in hand. There are a lot of schools, however, I will footnote, that make a recommendation to us that they would prefer to close that classroom, and we do see that happen. Mostly in classrooms with exceptional education situations where there are medical conditions which could pose additional complications for individuals who test positive for COVID-19. In those situations, the district or the local educational authority usually makes that recommendation.
Mr. Eller, you're breaking up.
So
You're breaking up a little.
Apologies for that.
I think we're good now.
I'll slow down a minute. Okay. I am a Surface Pro, which I don't usually recommend to anyone. So just give me a few seconds to get this to show up correctly. Okay, am I sounding out okay?
Yes.
All right, thank you. So what you're looking at here is the distribution of the 4,251 cases as reported as of last Thursday by age group. Again, you can see the majority of those cases taking place in the 0 to 11 population, followed closely by the 12 to 19 population, and then the 20 to 44. When we look at this breakdown by elementary, middle, and high school students, missing generally falls underneath staff, or sometimes we miss date of birth when those cases get reported. This is how that distributes across 3 areas. At that point, this will conclude the abbreviated presentation for you all. I can take a couple of questions if anyone wishes to ask them.
Well, thank you for your presentation, Mr. Eller. I appreciate you taking the time to give us an update. And I'm glad that you highlighted the difference between your recommendation, the Pima County Health Department and Combination's recommendation for a classroom closure, because we hear that a lot. My child was exposed. Why aren't we all quarantining? And also when we have a student that, let's say, my son is exposed and has to quarantine, but there's the siblings that go to different schools don't have to quarantine. And I know what was told to me is that we're really doing everything we can to try to keep students in school. And so as much as possible, we're trying to keep students in school. And so I understand that argument, but I am concerned, the numbers that when we first used to get these COVID numbers, there were a bunch of zeros everywhere. Like we had a bunch of zeros everywhere. And now it seems like every day the numbers are increasing. Sometimes double. This last update that we received, I think it's the highest number of cases that we've seen in our schools. So it's continued cause for concern. And we are seeing, and is this a general trend in the county where we're seeing more people that are fully vaccinated that are contracting COVID or having to isolate because of exposure?
Yeah, and I was actually talking to Dr. Cullen about this earlier today. We're seeing a general trend of, I believe it's 0.1 or 0.2 increases weekly in these fully vaccinated individuals who are then doing what we call breakthrough cases. The general consensus around that so far is that the reduction in hospital visits and mortality and morbidity overall is one of the biggest benefits of getting vaccinated. So we really do encourage everyone to get that vaccine.
And then can you, either Dr. Trujillo or Mr. Eller, speak to, I keep hearing from different parents saying, well, my one child was exposed and they could come back to school the next day. My other child was exposed and had to stay home for 10 days. Can we get some clarification as to what the difference would be in those cases?
Yeah, so what I can say in regards to the difference in quarantine has to really do with testing. So if you have an exposure, we always start from day 0 being the exposure. If someone is willing to take a test, we encourage them to test on day 5. If they test negative and continue to be asymptomatic, meaning that they don't have any symptoms, they can return to the classroom on day 8. If the individual does refuse to take a COVID test, then the quarantine period goes for a full 10-day period, pending again the fact that they do not present any symptoms. If those individuals present any symptoms, at that point they would be presumed positive, and we would again ask for a test to validate whether or not there is a COVID positive case in those situations. I know sometimes there have been cases where there's been an individual who has been exposed, who then slips through the net somehow and returns to the classroom. I would put that down generally to the volume of close contacts and cases that we've had to do contact tracing and case investigation on. It is really high, and there are going to be a few that fall through the cracks. But in general, we have really good communications with all of your health services staff, and they've been just amazing at keeping track of those situations and getting on the phone with us immediately so we can assist with communicating with parents and or guardians in regards to those individuals.
And what's the difference if a student is fully vaccinated versus those that are not vaccinated?
Yeah, great question. So if an individual is fully vaccinated and they have an established vaccine in ACES, which is the Arizona Immunization System, I forget what the acronym stands for, but they'll be present in that ACES system. And if they've had their full vaccination series, they're automatically exempt from any kind of quarantine, except for the fact if they have any symptoms. If the individual is fully vaccinated and then they end up symptomatic, we encourage them to test as quickly as possible. And then we would also ask them to test 5 days after exposure, regardless if symptoms present or not. That does not mean that they have to go into quarantine. It's just we have seen an increase in some of those breakthrough cases. So in those situations, we would encourage any and all individuals to seek testing after day 5 with a Binax antigen self-test or a Binax Now test or PCR, whatever is available to those individuals, just to verify that they haven't contracted asymptomatically COVID-19.
Okay, any other questions, board members?
I have a question.
Ms. Luna Rose.
Thank you, Ms. Grijalva. Either Mr. Eller or Dr. Hill or even Ms. Grijalva. So perhaps I missed it during the presentation, but, and my apologies if I did, where are we on, like, just levels in the county, like in terms of the red, yellow? I know we're not in the green, so I'm kind of curious where we are.
Yeah, we're currently in the yellow, and actually pull up really quick on stuff for you. There's different metrics that Pima County uses in order to figure out what our level of transmission is. Just to remind everyone that when we first established this, it was before the state had any notification system in place. We've adopted some of those metrics based on what the state rolled out. So just give me a few more seconds here to navigate the page. But we're in high transmission, but we are, I believe we're in yellow currently in terms of the different colors that represent what that transmission looks like. And I'll pull up that graphic for you here in a minute. I don't know if Board Member Grijalva or Dr. Trujillo, if you want to.
He's looking up the item, and I think so. We're
I have it pulled up on my web browser already. I'm happy to share my screen.
I don't know. Can we allow Dr. Ravi to share the screen?
Thanks, Steve.
Yes?
Yeah.
Do you want to go ahead?
Oh, looks like Brian has it.
Or Brian? Either one. There we are. So,
You can see positivity. We are in progress with COVID-19 like illness. The breakdown of what these different colors represent is found here on tab, which give you the overall metrics. Healthcare system availability. Wonderful tracking for us contact facilities for patients who can't be discharged.
so as far as transmission, we're in the red. Yeah, so as far as transmission, we're in the red. Percent positivity, we're fairly high. And if you look at any of our COVID-19 daily cases that are coming through, you can see a steady progression of the increase in the number of people testing positive in TUSD. Yeah.
And when we had our last governing board meeting, it was only one of those criteria were under red. It was red and 2 yellows for that.
Right. Yep.
So it's getting worse.
It is getting worse, and I think part of the problem oh, I'm sorry. I think, Mr. you have 2 screens up or something. Do you? Something is an echo. Anyway, I'm sorry. So I think part of the problem is that, we're going to events and we're having events in our communities. I see them in our schools where it's outdoors, but it's at a football game. So most of the people are unmasked at a football game because we see that graphic that says it's okay if we're outdoors, missing the asterisk that says unless you're close to people. So it's, I just think that we have to be careful. And I don't think Mr. Eller, correct me if I'm wrong, but the trend is still this where we're not necessarily contracting COVID at school, but people are coming to school already positive. In some cases, we're sharing, but in most cases, my understanding was we're identifying that someone is not feeling well at school and they're testing at school.
Yeah, we have seen increases in outbreaks this last week in school settings, but that also it aligns with the idea that we have seen an increase in community transmission, which is more reflective of the overall case rates.
Yeah. I think the highest number in our schools that I've seen is like 4 in a specific school, but I'm trying to scan the document. Dr. Trujillo, did you want to add anything?
No, other than I echo the concerns that have been shared here. I know that fall break, was a time that our staff and our students did a lot of traveling. So I know that internally, all of you have been getting those reports. We've seen that spike happen here inside of the district. So I think that we can probably, as we look ahead, probably make the assumption that coming back from Christmas break is going to be rough. And even the Thanksgiving break that's coming up.
Did anyone have any additional questions for Mr. Eller? Oh, Ms. Shaw.
Thank you. I just want some clarifications, Mr. Eller, on a couple things that I've heard in your presentation or with some of the other board members' comments and questions. First, if you could clarify about siblings of quarantined students. I heard someone say that if a student is isolated, the contact tracers aren't necessarily going to contact a sibling if they're, in the same school or another school. Can you respond to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So in the case of isolation, that's where you have an identified positive laboratory confirmed case. If there are siblings in that household, then those siblings would most likely be recommended to quarantine through the contact tracing case investigation, except for in situations where their siblings or if the parent or guardian communicates that there is the ability to effectively quarantine those siblings away from the positive case in shared household situations, in situations where they have a network of supportive friends, then that is an allowable exemption. For a sibling that's a close contact, though, that's in quarantine, let's say that child A is in a fourth grade classroom and was a close contact to a positive case. That individual would then move into quarantine. Their siblings do not have to quarantine unless that child ends up testing positive and then becomes a positive case. And then we would look at the positive case and those close contacts among the siblings. Does that kind of help address the question, ma'am?
It does. I'm just sorry, I'm hearing feedback. I'm wondering if is that sibling going to also be required to get a COVID test? I understand, at first they may not, but you never know, if they have contracted it at home, and it seems to me that it would, if we, try to be on the safe side, that anyone in the house that goes to a TUSD school should also, be under those quarantine restrictions. Vaccinated people who are asked to quarantine can forego quarantine if they're not symptomatic. Looking for some clarity on that and the rationale because, correct me if I'm wrong, but vaccinated people are still able to spread COVID, and so whether they're asymptomatic or not, they still pose a risk to those around them. And I'm wondering, is that a Pima County policy, or is that that we're under, or if TUSD can tweak that policy? Because to me, that seems kind of irrational. If someone could speak to that.
Yeah, so I can speak to that a little bit. The CDC recommendation is that individuals who have been fully vaccinated are exempt from quarantine unless they become symptomatic. The recommendation is for anyone who is fully vaccinated, who's been exposed to a laboratory confirmed positive case, they should test on day 5, regardless of symptom or asymptomatic presence within that individual. It's a CDC recommendation that the state health department that we then carry over. In terms of, I'm not sure about what that policy implementation would look like for the district. But we do know that there is a significantly reduced amount of individuals who have been fully vaccinated that end up testing positive or acquiring COVID-19. And I can get some more specific data number recommendations on that at the local level for you all too.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm just concerned about those people entering back into our schools if they have not received a negative COVID test. Am I the only board member concerned about that? Whether they're, symptomatic or not, and they've been asked to quarantine, I feel like it warrants a test or at least a small quarantine.
Well, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think the argument was trying to ensure that our students don't lose education days because I mean, I know of several students that have received like 3 letters of close contact. And so if they were to quarantine with every letter, they conceivably would have missed like 40 days of school already. And so I understand the concern because we're hearing it all the time. People who are fully vaccinated can transmit it. And so you did mention something about a student who's fully vaccinated, provided that they don't have any, when they don't have any symptoms, should take a test 5 days after exposure. Is that for every student, or is that only, or does that only apply for students that are not vaccinated?
Yeah, that's another great question. So anyone who has a close contact with a confirmed positive case should test 5 days after exposure, with the date of exposure being day 0. So that's an important clarifying point. Okay. For individuals who are fully vaccinated, and I just want to make sure I say this clearly, there is no recommendation for quarantine for those individuals. If they start to post symptoms, then the recommendation is to test. If the test is positive, they move directly into isolation. So for fully vaccinated individuals, there is no recommendation for quarantine. And that's for CDC and ADHS.
Okay. Any other questions, board members?
Just one more question to clarify
Ms.
that.
Shaw.
Thank you. So just to be clear, so those vaccinated people who have been asked to quarantine, they do have to take a test. Is that what you said?
Yeah, just to clarify that though, really quick on a couple of points. If someone's fully vaccinated, we wouldn't ask them to quarantine. They may get a notice to quarantine, but then after looking at vaccine status, that nullifies it cancels that quarantine notice, more or less, if that makes sense. We would recommend that all individuals, regardless of vaccine status, test 5 days after exposure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, board members? Okay. Thank you so much for your presentation, Mr. Eller. We appreciate it. Appreciate your time.
Thank you all again. It was an honor to be here. Have a wonderful rest of your evening.
And thank you for your
Eller.
partnership with our schools. We really appreciate
You're
it.
very
We're
welcome.
looking forward to having many pop-ups so we can get our little ones vaccinated too. Thank you. All right. Item 7.3 is the proposed school calendar for the 2022-2023 school year. Dr. Trujillo.
Actually, Ms. Garabo, we still have 2 more items to address in COVID
I'm
readiness.
so sorry.
Okay?
Go ahead.
Next, I'd like to bring up Mrs. Hewitt, just to kind of give you a brief update on the procedure that we've arrived at that's going to be supportive of students not getting double the work when they go out for COVID-19 protocols. And then, of course, we will finish the COVID readiness item immediately following Mrs. Hewitt's presentation with the presentation of our operational plan to return to live board meetings in January.
President
Hewitt?
Grijalva?
Thank you.
President Grijalva?
Yes.
Before we move
Dr.
on to academic issues with COVID, I'm not sure if the administration has this information, but I was wondering on the public health and testing aspects, do we know how many percentage of students are going as part of participating in the COVID pools?
I can ask Leslie to put that together.
Yeah.
We only know total number of pools, but in terms of a specific number of students broken out by school grade level, I think we can put that together for you.
Great, thank you.
I think it's not as high as we'd like it to be.
It's not as high as we like it to be. The last public update that we had, I think, was hovering around 20%.
Right. So more people participating, the safer our campuses
Absolutely.
are. Yeah. Thank you. I do remember it being fairly low.
Mrs. Hewitt?
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Trujillo. Good evening, governing board members, President Grijalva, Dr. Trujillo, legal counsel. We wanted to bring to you, the governing board, just a quick update regarding the academic options for our students who have been placed in quarantine. Gina, if you can move on to the next slide, please. Next slide, one more. Thank you very much. With regards to our academic options, we definitely wanted to make sure that we provided both our teachers and our families with some options. So this is just a quick flow chart that shows that either students can receive teacher-assigned work or they can be placed in ACS. So I'll describe the 2 options and then I'll pause for questions. In terms of teacher-assigned work, we want to make sure that our teachers, our students, and families have have the option where teachers provide an assignment for the longevity of the quarantine. And in assigning that, they have to acknowledge that they have to provide the assignments for as long as the quarantine period is in place, and also provide any support that's needed. And this is done through the mitigation liaison at each school site. Our ACS option is also when our teachers will agree, along with the mitigation liaison at the school site, that students will complete the work that is in ACS. We presented to the governing board what that work looks like with the 10 lessons and the 10 days lesson planning that's available there. When a student completes ACS work, the agreement will be that teachers will accept the student work that's completed within that platform. Next slide, please. All right, and this slide just speaks to the options and steps available for our students that are in quarantine. Once again, just in a little bit more detail, as you can see, we have the three options. We did select letter C is available as well. If the student is experiencing symptoms and is sick, of course, we want to make sure that they get healthy, so they wouldn't have to complete any work, but rather our Synergy team can definitely show our teachers how to complete that work in grade work, just as if they were regularly sick. So that's a little bit different. But the two options that I described before are the teacher work, which if selected, our teacher, during the form, so what happens is, once a student is placed in quarantine, the mitigation liaison at each school site will complete a form, and I'll show that in the next slide, just a brief example. The form, what it basically speaks to is, what is the option that is selected, either A or B, or C if the student is experiencing symptoms, and then we would indicate in the form that the teacher agrees to either providing schoolwork themselves to the student or placing the student in ACS. So those are the three options we have. This is just a brief screenshot of what the form looks like. This is the form that's completed by our mitigation liaison. And then that's where they indicate the student's name, the information, what activity they will be doing, either A, B, or C, and then also indicate the teachers' names that are either providing work for the student or that are putting the student in ACS. So those are the two options available. Now, so that's the quick update we have regarding ACS, and I'll open it up for any questions.
We do have a request for action that is written into the BAI language tonight, specifically regarding this item. We are looking to expand our ACS team by 2 teachers, and we're looking to use our contracted vendor Maxim to do so. Just in case we see an increase in line with what we saw from the Pima County Health Department here, with infection rates, particularly at secondary, we just want to be ready with 2 additional teachers that would work exclusively for secondary. The funding would be coming from ESSER, and of course, being a contracted vendor, if the need isn't there later on in the quarter, we can simply inform the vendor that we don't need the assignments. But that is the action attached to this particular item.
Okay, so just to be clear, it's to hire 2 additional teachers for ACS.
Correct.
And you would be utilizing Maxim as our vendor.
Correct.
Okay. Board members, Dr. Ravi?
Thank you, President Grijalva. So I was a little confused. So I understand if a student is doing the ACS assignments, they'll be logging in, they'll have an ACS teacher who will be supervising them and working with them on completing those assignments. If they're doing the teacher assigned work, are they still logging into ACS and doing the teacher assigned work with the ACS instructor, or who's supposed to be supervising that work and making sure it gets completed and any questions that they have are answered?
Yeah, they won't be online. So they will be on their own with teacher assigned work. That work they probably will not be able to receive any assistance until they arrive back in the classroom, and they can work one-on-one with the teacher.
Huh. Well, that's a little concerning, though, because it really is dependent on the teacher, right? Whether the student is going to be doing classroom work or online work through ACS.
That's correct. Our ACS teachers, as we've seen, and Mrs. Hewitt chime in at any point, they're strictly focused on actively teaching the ACS curriculum and the lessons associated with that. Our ACS framework was not built for simultaneous teaching in terms of the ACS teacher delivering the ACS curriculum and then also being responsible for tutoring a range of students in all kinds of different content areas. So the infrastructure simply wasn't built that way. Mrs. Hewitt, you want to add anything?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Ms. Grijalva. We also wanted to provide some options for teachers. There are some teachers that take this very to heart, so they want to be able to assign students work. So we wanted to provide them that option. Also, we have our teachers who, they may not have enough time to provide that assigned work, so they have the ACS option. So we definitely wanted to work with our teachers in providing those options and be flexible about that. But it's either one or the other, for sure.
So, no, I understand that, but I think if I'm just to piggyback on Dr. Ravi's question, if we have a student who, like my daughter, let's say she has to quarantine for whatever reason, and teachers for her third, fourth, and fifth period are opting to go with ACS, and the others are opting to provide work. I mean, that's a conflict. Have we figured out a solution for that?
Yeah, so within our form, what our mitigation liaison will do, they will complete the form indicating which periods are going to be assigned by the teacher and which periods are going to be through ACS. And then once the student would have to log into ACS to complete the core courses that would be assigned to them. So that's how it would work.
And do we still have tutoring available through our student services departments? I know that there's tutoring available. Most of it is online. I guess I just want to make sure that our students who need that support, I mean, just working independently is a really difficult thing, especially if you don't have anyone to lean on when you have a concern.
I'll just say, if you're working independently in that circumstance, we can't send a staff member and we can't have you coming into the building because you're out for COVID protocols,
Right.
which makes it more complicated. And we have not established a third group of teachers that would work specifically
Right.
online for kids that chose to complete work assigned by the teacher. We have not established that third category.
Well, we don't have the student isn't getting the option, right? It's the teacher that has the option.
We're constricted to the teacher
Right.
making the call because statute supports them as the primary agent determining the final grade. So we're kind of locked into, it has to start with their recommendation.
Right. So what I'm saying is, are we giving these students that are working independently a list of resources, like tutoring options that are available online for if they need help? Like we have our public library does it. We have other
We can do that.
online tutoring.
Yeah.
I mean, I just think that it's important for us to provide.
Yeah.
We want our students to be successful, and they don't really have the option. I mean, it's like if my fourth period teacher wants me to do this packet, I'm doing that packet because that's what they asked me to do, right?
I mean,
Yeah, and we have supports at the school sites, our CSPs, MTSS, and other resources that would probably check in with the students that have teacher assigned work.
Yeah, I think that'd be really important. Dr. Ravi, did that answer your question, or did you have a follow-up? Okay, all right. Ms. Luna Rose.
Thank you, Ms. Grijalva. Ms. Hewitt, so I'll use my daughter as an example. She's a GATE student, so she's got 4 core classes. So if she were to quarantine for any reason, how would we be able to ensure students like her and her classmates aren't, and I know we've talked about this before, but I think this would be, I think it's a valid concern for any parent that she would be doing ACS work, but then still have to come up and catch up with all her GATE core classes. So how are we trying to make sure that we're still not doubling the work?
Yes, that's why we have either ACS work, and what happens, ACS only provides 4 subjects, so if it's ELA and math, that would be the only lessons that they would be able to do during that period of time, and then there is a completion report that's completed. I would assume that they would have to work with teachers to make sure that that work is caught up after the student is out of quarantine. So it's really a balancing act in terms of the courses that are available through ACS and what you can do while you're in quarantine, and then balancing additional work when they come back out of quarantine. If the teacher, they have to accept the report, but also there may be other options to catch up and work with the teacher directly in terms of what assignments could be added on.
Okay, because a program such as GATE, I mean, it's pretty intensive. I mean, and the amount of work that she has every day is a lot. And so I would just want to make sure her and her classmates and other students in programs similar across the district are not just being double worked and double taxed, and there's already a lot that we're asking our kiddos to do
Yeah.
right now.
One thing that I'll share with the governing board, let's see if I can pull it up. The percentage of students that we currently have in ACS is really small right now. This was as of last week. So about 32% of our families don't respond to the ACS communication. 22% take work home from teachers. 16% right now is choosing ACS, and about 30% return early to school because they have negative COVID test results. So I just wanted to make sure I put that in perspective as well, that not many of our students, if they are in ACS, what we're seeing right now is that it's for a very short period of time.
Okay, thank you. And I had a follow-up. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead and then Ms. Shaw, and then I'll go back to Dr. Ravi.
Okay. And this is for Dr. Trujillo. So when would you want these prospective teachers to start?
We'd like them to start as soon as we can get them. We want to stay ahead of the ACS demand, especially with the holiday season.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Shaw?
Thank you. I just want to echo what Ms. Luna Rose said. I think that, there's certain classes, certain subjects where ACS really will, in essence, if they decide to go with ACS, then once they return to class, perhaps they will be very far behind and have to catch up. And so I want some clarification on those options. If you could go back to, I think you closed it, but if you could go to slide 4. Because I think Dr. Trujillo said that it would be mainly up to the teacher, but in slide 4, it seems like it's up to a multiple group of people. Is it up? Slide 4, please. Okay, so mitigation liaison at school sites contacts teacher and family, and all parties decide on one of the best options for the student. And so, if a parent wants their student or their son or daughter to have teacher work instead of ACS, but the teacher wants ACS, how are we dealing with that? I feel like the parents' decision should override the teacher's. But do we have like a process for figuring that out, or is it really like the teacher decides, the teacher's recommendation trumps all?
It is primarily the teacher recommendation, Ms. Shaw. However, it is a collaborative effort, so the mitigation liaison contacts all parties. The ideal would be to come to consensus with all parties, the family, the student, because the student might be experiencing symptoms. So if that's the case, then of course we would do what's best for the student. So ultimately, it's a collaborative effort between the teacher, the family, coming to a consensus with what's best for the student.
Okay, and if earlier in the quarantine period, they decide to go with ACS or teacher work, and then a few days later, the student starts to experience symptoms, how are the parents should they just contact the mitigation liaison, and is that able to change that status?
Yes, and actually on the website, we do have the names on our TUSD website, the names of all the liaisons, so definitely stay in contact with your school site and to fit the needs of the students.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Ravi?
Thank you, President Grijalva. So Ms. Stewart, I think, so let me just start by saying, I think this is great. I talk to parents in other districts around the country, and no one's putting this much time and energy into making sure that kids, when they're quarantining, have access to education like we are. And so I really applaud all the work that you and leadership and, of course, our ACS teachers are doing throughout our district to help ensure this. I think what you're hearing, 100% of your board members are made up of TOC parents, and we're all thinking, what does this mean for us? Like if my daughter, who's a 4th grader, was exposed or tested positive, and what does it mean for our family and her education? And so I think we're hearing the concerns about, one size doesn't fit all, and we got to figure out, how to make this work. And I understand that there's a small amount of students currently participating in this whole program anyway, who are quarantining, and just making sure that there is some attention by someone, whether it's a quarantine, coordinator or whether the mitigation liaisons can do this, with making sure that it makes sense for that student, whether they're in GATE, whether they have learning disabilities, or whether, we know that some students thrived in online education and some didn't, and making sure that everyone, whether it's 5 days or 10 days or however long people are quarantined, they aren't missing out on education. So I think that's what we want to hear as parents. We want to hear that, we understand there's going to be a lot of one-case scenarios. Some things aren't going to fit everyone, but there'll be someone who's going to make sure that the students are supported, the parents are supported, and then they're getting the best education possible.
Okay. Any additional comments? All right, so there was a request by Dr. Trujillo to hire 2 teachers for ACS.
I'll move that item.
Thank you, Dr. Ravi.
I'll second.
Dr. Ravi moved the item. Ms. Luna Rose seconds. Any discussion?
Are we sure this is all we need right now? Should we, with also the numbers increasing, and we get, into the holidays?
I think 2 is a great start because right now we really don't have anybody for secondary, like a sole designee, so having 2 work the secondary. And as Mrs. Hewitt said, we're not necessarily filled yet with the 3 existing ACS teachers that we have working the other grade levels. Mrs. Hewitt, do you want to add anything?
I would agree. We have 2 at the elementary level right now, so it would complement the program if we have the 2 secondary to support our students in secondary for sure.
Ms. Shaw.
Thank you. Personally, I would like us to use a long-term sub for this position. I think we're outsourcing too much nowadays, and I would hope maybe we can also have those this position, whether it's Maxim or a long-term sub, perhaps they could toggle between ACS and helping to tutor the students who are assigned teacher work. Because I don't think we should leave the students in teacher work just on their own. I know we tentatively have an idea of what we're going to do with them, but I don't understand why we can't have those teachers who are in ACS, especially if the numbers are lower right now, to also help the other students in quarantine.
Dr. Trujillo, do you want to address the question that Ms. Shaw brought up about using subs? I know we have a shortfall of subs.
We're always open to subs that want to work these positions at any time. If we have a sub approach us and say, I want this Maxim position, we're willing to bring that sub in.
Okay.
But our fill rates right now don't support right now that.
So this is not exclusively Maxim. We'll give you the discretion. I mean, we're allowing
Yeah.
We're going to vote to hire 2 teachers in ACS, and however that is able to be filled.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, because look, if the subs come in, it's the same situation. Subs are at will as long as the need exists at the position in the school, just the same as Maxim. So as long as there's a need in the particular assignment, we're going to fill it with either a sub or a Maxim. We just have not had subs interested in the permanent sub positions. We haven't had subs to the extent that we need them, to the level that we need them to cover all of our vacancies, available to take all the daily assignments and all the long-term assignments that exist in the district right now. So, and I'm not telling anything.
Right.
I'm not telling you anything you don't know.
All right. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Item passes 4-1 with Ms. Shaw voting no. Okay. Dr. Trujillo, we have one other item.
Yeah, at this point,
Action
the last,
item.
the concluding portion of tonight's COVID readiness item is a review by our governing board operational team, led by our coordinator, Ms. Peña, and our director for communications, Ms. Lenhart, to review the operational plan for the governing board's potential return to live in-person meetings in January.
All right, great. Thank you for joining or having us. So tonight, good evening, President Grijalva, Board Clerk Shaw, board members, Dr. Trujillo, Mr. Ross, and staff. We will be going through, as Dr. Trujillo said, the plan for coming back to in-person meetings. Much of this is similar to what we presented in July, but we want to go through it. There are a few changes, and then give you all time to discuss and let us know if you have any other suggestions. So next slide, Jean. So we will be going through 3 different areas. One, we'll talk briefly about the Duffy System. Then we'll look at the various layouts, both for the executive session and then the board meetings, and then how the call to audience will work. Next slide. So as you all know, the Duffy System is fairly old. We have moved back to the room camera. When we go back to in-person meetings, everyone will no longer use a freestanding microphone. You'll be moving up to the dais and using the microphones there. We will be live streaming it as we are, but we will not be able to Zoom people in. So any presenters or call to the audience will be done live in the Duffy boardroom. And for those that are listening for live stream, there is a 25-second delay. So if you're in the room and you're trying to watch on your phone, you do see a difference in time. All the computers, if you have one also as an alternate computer, we'll need to make sure that they are muted so we don't get any feedback. But of course, we'll also have our own support staff there that will be able to help you with any technical issues as we move forward. And then Ms. Pena will go through the next few slides to show you how the layout will be. Yolanda?
President Grijalva, members of the board, Dr. Trujillo, and Mr. Ross. The first slide we're going to go through is executive session. And for this part, all 5 board members, Dr. Trujillo, Mr. Ross, and myself, as well as any presenters that we have for exec, will be in the library. We will have individual tables set out for each one of us, and they will be spread out through the library. We'll open up the library, so we'll have the whole room instead of the half that we usually have. And we should be having plexiglass on each table as well. Next slide, please. So for the MPR room, all board members will be sitting up at the dais. Dr. Trujillo, Mr. Ross, and Michelle will be at tables on the floor. And then Mr. Armstrong will be sitting on the side of the dais. And then I will remain in the library. We will have all presenters wait in the ocean or the cactus room until it is their time to come and present. And then anyone in the MPR will be speaking into the microphones at the podium, not at a computer microphone. Our call to the audience will be in the MPR, and we will have them wait in the MPR or in the courtyard if we don't have any seats available. And we're limiting the guests to 30 people in the MPR room with about 25 chairs set outside on the sidewalk for overflow. Next slide, please. So this is kind of the layout of the 5 red dots are representing the board members at the dais, and the one on the side is Mr. Armstrong, and Dr. Trujillo, Mr. Ross, and Michelle will be at the tables on the floor, and the guest of seating of 30 people. The blue dots on the side are the outside in the courtyard for the additional overflow for call to the audience. And then in the ocean rooms and the cactus room are the presenters that will be waiting to come in to speak at their agenda item. Next slide, please. And this is just kind of the way it'll look. We will have a rope so that public members will not pass the rope to go up to the dais. And then we do have a table set up for SLT at the side. So as one person is presenting, we'll have another ready on standby. So when their presentation is over, the next one will be ready to go so that we can keep the flow of the meeting going. Next slide, please. For a call to the audience, we are going to either have in person or you can have your comments submitted to be read. And we are requesting that if you're speaking in person or you're going to have your comments read, to submit them by email by noon the day of the meeting. And only confirmed speakers will attend in person. They'll all be required to wear a mask and follow COVID safety protocols. We'll provide outdoor audio to those that are going to have to wait in the patio area so that they'll be able to hear the meeting as well. In-person speakers will be given priority entrance. So we will have provided a list to school safety, so they'll have that to mark off who's coming in to speak for call to the audience. For For outside, we will have 6 feet markers placed on the sidewalk, and they'll be called in as we get to them. And school safety will help us to manage those participants that are coming in to speak for call to the audience. And then we're going to have for call to the audience, we're going to actually have 2 stand-up mics instead of the podium, and then we'll wipe off the mics between speakers. And then we'll continue with a 3-minute timer that will be either myself or Michelle letting us know when our time is complete. Next slide, please. And if you have any questions.
Questions, board members? Ms. Shaw.
Thank you, Ms. Pena. I have a question about the call to the audience. And so I saw on the presentation it said that the call to the audience has to submit their letter beforehand, and only, clarify with me if I'm misinterpreting this, only the confirmed speakers are allowed to be present in the boardroom?
So if a person is requesting to speak in person, they still need to just submit their name and the topic that they're going to be speaking on so that we can have them on the list. And then those that are going to be reading, we'll add them to the list as well. But those that are going to be wanting to speak in person, we'll confirm with them that they'll be able to come in person.
Okay, so they don't necessarily have to send in their letter. They can just reach out to you by phone or email with their intention to.
It'll be by email, the same way that they're doing it now, where they have to send in their comments. But all we're requesting for the in-person speakers is that they provide their full name and the topic of what they're going to be commenting on. I
see. Okay, and for those of us who don't have internet access or aren't computer literate, are they able to just call 1010 and talk to you and state that they would like to speak?
If that's what you would like, then yes, we can have that done.
Okay, thank you. I would like that.
Any other questions? And so just to clarify, Dr. Trujillo, this in-person process is going into effect for what meeting?
This operational plan would be, according to your vote, it's going to be operationalized on Tuesday, January 11th.
Okay, our first regular
Your first
board meeting
regular
of the
meeting
year.
of the board.
Okay. Any other questions, board members? And so, Dr. Trujillo, this was just an information item.
Just an information,
Right, okay.
and it's not necessarily for you to take a formal vote, but just to make sure that we receive your direction to either proceed or add any protocols or adjust anything.
Board member, Ms. Luna Rose.
I'm just assuming, just so the public knows, that we would have stations for hand sanitizer and that sort of, all those mitigation measures in
Correct.
place.
And as you've seen, we want to be very clear with the public, and this is in line with what we just saw from the Pima County Health Department. The seating is going to be limited here in Duffy, as you saw pictorially in the presentation. So we're back. It's going to be back live, but there's going to be some strong mitigation protocols in place.
And so just to clarify then, anybody presenting, they perhaps can they call in? Like if we have a board member that's unable to attend in person, but we won't be able to we would have no Zoom capacity. It's just
Phone.
like it did before with the
Yeah,
phone.
it would just be phone. There's no Zoom capacity with the return with the operational plan. And largely, as we saw with the plan, because of Duffy's capacity.
And so one other question I had regarding executive session. So because we have so many speakers that are calling in from everywhere, just a thought that perhaps you would continue to have Zoom options, like we would just do our executive session the way we do it now. Most of us are in person. We could do it closer, but it is, I think, convenient and also probably saves us a little bit of money with some of our legal people that come in for like a 10-minute
Sure.
discussion. I mean, unless I guess they can be on the phone. I just want to sort of try to reduce the number of people that are in a smaller confined space. And
Absolutely.
so we can continue to do, unless someone is opposed to it, I think it's kind of nice to be able to sit in a space and, have people come in from wherever they are and participate that way.
So I don't mean to put her on the spot, but Mary is kind of the master of Duffy, and so is Miguel. And so, Mary, correct me if I'm wrong, we're looking at two separate operational capacities, right? The library being able to continue Zoom as we do there is separate from what we know here is we're unable to simultaneously live stream and support Zoom speakers calling in. Can you speak to that a little
Hi,
bit?
everyone. My name is Mary Canty, and good evening. Thank you for having me. I don't know that we've addressed Zoom for executive session,
Okay.
Dr. Trujillo. We've gone ahead and ordered the tables that are needed for you all to meet in person, much in the same configuration you are right now. So, but it is true that once you go back to this system, you will have telephony, but you won't have Zoom. There's no way we've figured out so far to combine telephone and Zoom.
I remember when we tried it. It was not so successful.
It was
Yes.
not really successful.
But if we're staying, because executive session has always been a different setup. So if we're staying the way we are now, unless our board staff has a concern, it shouldn't be a concern for you all here because we're not meeting in the NPR room.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any concerns about that.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't see why that wouldn't work. And we did do that for a little while.
Right.
When we started, so.
Yeah. So unless anyone else has concerns, at least I'd like to keep the option open, especially if we have board members who, for whatever reason, can't attend in person but would still like to participate. Because participating on the phone is a challenge. I've had to do it a couple times, and it is a challenge. Yes, Dr. Robbie, did you have a question?
I think
Thank
the
you,
executive
Mary.
session and limiting that is a great idea. I just wasn't sure why we couldn't change that camera out for a webcam and just keep the whole meeting on Zoom, and so people can come in and out for the main meeting part too.
So I can address that. So we have ordered a whole new system for Duffy, but like all technology, it is backlogged. We put in the order about a month ago, and we probably won't get it until February or March. So when we get the new system, we will get some additional options, but until we have it, we don't know exactly everything that it's going to be able to do.
Mary, if you could kind of address, are there any audio challenges with Dr. Ravi's suggestions here?
Well, the new system will be a web-based system,
Okay.
a network-based system. So that should give us a few more options at that time. But the problem is right now is toggling between the two, basically, between in-room service and then Zoom service. So we just want to be aware of the amount of staff time. It actually would probably be another production position to do that, to run a switcher between the two. Because Gene's kind of booked right now. It's a little bit tough for him to add being able to listen, to switch between Zoom for the viewers from live stream and the indoor interior camera here. So that's been the issue so far. It's like trying to figure out how to add in more capability to this system, as Leslie just said, knowing that the system is kind of obsolete.
And I do want to extend kudos to the TUSD team for what you've been able to do, because I watch many meetings and participate in some other ones, and we do it really well. You all have set us up so it is the maximum opportunity for the public to engage in what we're talking about here, and so I just want to say I appreciate it.
And we will look into your suggestions. So we will follow up. And we'll try, we're often here trying things out. We tried some things today.
Thank you. Any other questions or suggestions? Okay, and so whenever you have the new equipment in and want to add an option. It's not me. Okay, it's usually me. It's not me this time. All right. Okay. Thank you. So it was just information. We didn't have another item.
No, in the absence of any board member concerns, we'll be ready to proceed.
Yeah, and
at
I
this
would
point.
like to say that perhaps as an, I don't know if it's an option for us to do pool testing, but I would be open to doing that just because we'll be in closer proximity. Or we can get some tests from Pima County, and have some here, I think, for those that are concerned.
Absolutely.
I think that would be okay. All right. Yes.
I was going to say, I would like to see it maybe a run-through with the 5 of us. I don't know if that's feasible, but at least before we start the January 11th meeting.
Yeah. Okay.
We can absolutely set that up. We'll work with Yolanda and Dr. Trujillo to find a date that works.
Okay. Address rehearsal. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else on this item, Dr. Trujillo?
And that concludes COVID readiness.
Okay, thank you so much. Now we're on 7.3, proposed school calendar for the 22-23 school year. Dr. Trujillo.
Yes, so I'd like to welcome our calendar team, Mrs. Hewitt, Mrs. Aranda, to talk about what the proposed calendar is going to be for your consideration this evening.
All right. Good evening, President Grijalva, Clerk Shaw, board members, Dr. Trujillo, Council Ross, and staff. Tonight, Ms. Hewitt and I bring forward the work of our district calendar committee, which we have been leading. Next slide. You will see here our committee was comprised of representatives from employee groups, TEA, CWA, ELI, as well as parents and teachers and district leadership, many of whom also are parents. Next slide. As we work to develop a calendar for our community, we took the following into consideration. Of course, major holidays, as well as some religious and cultural holidays, and also considerations such as number of days in each quarter, meeting the instructional requirements from ADE, and when we begin and end the school year. Next slide. We engaged in the following process as we worked through developing the calendar. We, of course, started with our current calendar and looked at the feedback that our different groups had received and had on that calendar, implemented some of that feedback into the design, not only of the new calendar, but also the design of our community survey. We went and got community feedback on our proposed calendar, incorporated that feedback into a final draft, which we are presenting to you tonight. Next slide. Our survey results since then, this was as of last week, but as of tonight, over 8,000 respondents have responded to the survey, and about 60% now are in favor of option A, which is our traditional winter break, which goes with teacher planning day on a Friday and coming back on a Monday. We had proposed a calendar in which it ended in the middle of the week to allow for some days before holidays. And then in spring break, we ended up with 59% of respondents selecting option A as well, which is the traditional end of quarter spring break, as opposed to one that aligned with the spring holiday. Next slide. Oh, and let me just mention that that is typical of surveys that we've done in the past regarding calendars. Our community seems to like the pattern and structure of our current TUSD calendar. So what you have here tonight is a very familiar calendar with a start date in early August, an end date before Memorial Day, fall, winter, and spring breaks that begin as soon as the quarters are over, and professional learning days at the beginning of each quarter and remaining on Thursdays. Next slide. I just want to mention that we did take into account and have created actually an interfaith calendar that addresses our different community representations of religious observations as well as cultural observations and customs of our TUSD community, and we'll be sharing that calendar as well. Can I help with any questions?
I'll just chime in. Yeah, thank you for posting the attachment. This is really the first time we've gone to this length. This really outlines all of the major religious observances from an interfaith perspective. And not only does it just list the holidays, but it also lists some of the accommodations that we'll be asking of our teachers to make for our students, and that we as an employer will start observing for some of our employees that need some of the types of accommodations that are listed. And whenever the governing board does approve of the calendar, whether it's tonight or it returns on December 7th, this will be posted on our district website, and it'll be available on every school website so that it'll be accessible for any member of the community.
I think that's great, and I hope that other organizations look at it, because we had that issue in Pima County where we're holding a board meeting on holy days, and I think that we're one of the very few organizations that look at all of those religious and cultural observances. So thank you for that.
And to your point, President Grijalva, we wanted to plan all these dates out and identify all of these important dates prior to making the governing board meeting calendar coming up. That's the first task of the board, obviously, in January. So now having all of these dates, it's going to help us better plan those meeting dates.
Yeah, that's going to be really helpful. The other thing I would suggest, because I know that a lot of the our nonprofit partners with after-school programs and summer programs, they look at our school calendars to start planning that stuff out. And so, since this calendar has changed very little since we added the fall break, that was the biggest change in the last 19 years since I've been on the board. So since it hasn't changed that much, I'm wondering if we could have multi-year calendars, and if we could start looking at that option, because I do think it would help to plan, and we can plan out farther out, because here we are in November talking about our school calendar for 2022, and if we could have 23, 24, I mean, at least a 2-year buffer, that would be great.
Absolutely, and that is something that the calendar committee already has a draft of 23, 24, so we can bring that forward when the board desires.
Okay, board members, questions? And thank you so much for the options. I did go through them. I ended up opting for what's familiar. Sorry.
Like many others.
I know, apparently. Ms. Luna Rose, did you have a question?
Oh, I just want to say thank you for all the work on this. This is a really impressive chart and all the holidays, and it's very inclusive, and I think it's much appreciated by the community, or will be.
Did you want to move the calendar adoption?
Yes, I would like to move.
Okay, I'll second. Any additional discussion? Ms. Shaw.
Thank you. And I just want to thank staff for compiling this cultural and religious holiday and observances calendar. One thing I wonder, though, is this going to overlap on top of the school calendar, so people don't have to toggle between both to see if there's something? Is there a way that we can do that so it's easier for people to plan out?
We did debate that and looked at several options that have been provided in other organizations, and it really complicates. We thought it might create more confusion for families than be of a support. So we tried to format it very similar to our TUSD calendar, so at least when they look at, August on one calendar, it's in the same place on the other calendar, and we'll continue to do that.
Okay, just an idea. I know it probably will make the calendar totally messy, but if you want to maybe take one part of that day square and just put a tiny little square in it that people will know from a key that's a Jewish holiday or another sort of holiday. That's just an idea I had.
Or maybe a longer version of the same. Maybe a longer version of the same format, so you have more space. So it might not be as easy to print, but you could read it if someone wanted to print maybe on I don't know,
I know that Ms. Lenhart's team is going to be working with some new software to come up with the final published document that has to meet ADA requirements and so forth. So maybe they can look into that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Item passes unanimously. Thank you to you and to the calendar committee. I know it's a tough job. Very impressive response, though.
Very.
Yeah.
Ms. Grijalva?
Yes, Dr. Trujillo.
Oh, no, it was me.
Dr.
Oh,
Yes.
sorry, Dr. Ravi.
Yeah, I didn't see the 4 PD days. Are we doing the same plan of the 4 professional development days throughout the school year?
That's correct.
Yes.
Is that
They
gonna
are at the beginning of each quarter and will remain on Thursdays.
Okay, is that going to be added to the calendar at some point, or do we need to approve those dates?
It's on there.
Oh, is it on there?
They're on there. They should be pink, I believe.
Ah, I see. Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Okay. All right. Item 8.1, district enrollment update for school year 21-22, enrollment as of day 40 for the 21-22 school year. Dr. Trujillo.
Yes, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Young, Mr. Blaine Young, and his wonderful team for the annual. This is an annual report we give to the board and the community about the state of TUSD enrollment on one of the major milestone days that we use to measure potential funding for the subsequent school year. So, Mr. Young, take it away.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Trujillo. Good evening, board president, members of the board. As Dr. Trujillo said, we're bringing the 40th day update to the board. We do this each year. Tonight, I will present in conjunction with Leslie Lenhart, our Director of Communications, and also Christina Grabowski, who runs our School Community Services team. And we will walk you through the enrollment and provide a little detail about how our enrollment works in the district. Jean, next slide. So as we get into the enrollment, before we start looking at the data, we do want to provide a couple definitions that are really important to understand, because as we look at our enrollment tonight, we're going to talk about it in 2 ways. One way is just enrollment on day 40, and that's with all kids that are enrolled in our district, and so looking at that discrete number. But another way that we have to look at enrollment as a district is something called average daily membership. Average daily membership is different than just the number of kids on a specific day. It's the average of enrollment across the first 100 days of school. We're going to look at a 40th day snapshot of that tonight. It will continue out through the 100th day. But when we talk about average daily membership, it's very different than our straightforward enrollment, so we'll make those distinctions. The other thing that we want to do, since last year, the board will remember, we introduced the Enrollment Ambassador Program. We stood this program up late spring through the summer so that we could really engage our parents in a different way with a very supportive approach to helping particularly new parents to our district, but also parents that have needs that our enrollment ambassadors can help with. So our School Community Services Coordinator, Christina, will give us an update on that and how that program's doing. We're very excited about where that program is. We also, just back on November 1st, although we're just into the second quarter of this school year, we actually just started open enrollment November 1st for our next school year. So there are already activities going on to engage our families as we plan for the school year ahead. And so we're going to talk about that, including communication and advertising. And of course, we'll make ourselves available to answer any questions that the board has. Jean, next slide. So there's a couple things that are very important to understand about enrollment. 40th day is the instructional day, the 40th instructional day of the year. This is typically our peak enrollment for the current school year. You'll see that when we look at the graph of our data across the school year to see how our data trends. So we always look at this particular day as peak enrollment because we use it in different ways to plan in our district. It's used for a lot of things, including capacity and other things. The other definition, of course, is the 100th instructional day, which at that point we're looking at the average student, something called full-time equivalency, or FTE, from first to 100th day, averaged across that 100-day period. We refer to that as average daily membership. Average daily membership determines, in fact, how our district gets funded by ADE for the current school year. Jean, next slide. So just a little bit more about those definitions that I just referred to at the opening. Enrollment count is the number of students enrolled on a specific day, regardless of each student's grade level or their course load. It's just a count of students enrolled in our district. Daily membership is what I just described as the measure of how much each student contributes to the district's funding. Not all students are full-time, and not all students are counted the same. A student's contribution varies depending on grade and course load. At the secondary level, for example, membership is dependent on whether a student is scheduled into a full course of study. For this reason, membership is often described as a student's full-time equivalency. And normally we think of FTEs from a staffing perspective to do with staff in an organization, but this is how students are also counted in the school district. Gene, next slide. So just a little bit more on definition. Daily membership, each student contributes 1 day of membership or 1.0 FTE for each day he or she is enrolled, except in the following cases. Our state does not pay for a full day of kindergarten. They pay half day. Dr. Trujillo mentioned that in his opening remarks this evening. So a student who's with us all 100 days and is a kindergartner can at most only contribute half of an FTE. Ex-ed students that are preschool students contribute only 0.5 FTE. So we do, in the case of pre-K, get funded for students who have special needs and are enrolled in our district in that way. There are other preschool students, typical peers, and tuition-based that contribute no ADM. So that is a service that the district offers, and in some cases we do get funding in those. High school students must be scheduled into a minimum of 4 classes to contribute 1 day of membership. A high school student's membership is discounted in quarters. So for each course less than 4, for example, 3 courses is only 0.75 FTE, 2 courses 0.50, and so on. So that's why it's so important to understand the distinction between ADM and just enrollment on a specific day. We're going to look at that a little bit more as we go into the data, but I do want to make the board aware in the back of this presentation, there are a couple of examples that really help to understand this. One is very straightforward and just shows some examples of how kindergarten students contribute. So it's an example focused on that. The other is a little bit more complex and a little bit more about the reality of our district, where it deals with varying students at grade levels, the contribution they make, and arriving at our district on different days within the first 100 days of school, because depending on when they arrived does depend on how much we're funded for that particular student. Gene, next slide. Okay, so here you see this again is our enrollment on the 40th day. By the way, Governing Board, today we are at day 60 of our instructional day of the year. So this data is referring to data as it existed in the case of this school year, the 1st of October, the 40th day. So when we look at this, we always use that to compare like days for previous school years. Here you'll see 3 school years represented in this table, and you will see that as we look down the column farthest to the right for the 21-22 school year, you'll see our counts on the 40th day for each grade level. There are some highlights that I'd like to share with the board. One is that we did see some recovery in our pre-K. You heard what I described about pre-K in terms of funding, but it is an important program that we offer in our district to serve our families. And you will notice that we were 800 students last year in pre-K, where we're 923 this year on 40th day. We did have some limitation in programs in our capacity as Reem was getting those programs underway this year. With the capacity she had, she served as many programs as she could. So even regaining some of those students is a tribute to Reem and what her team was able to do. Our hope is that that continues to increase, because that particular enrollment, while it's not something that's normally funded by the state other than for ex-ed students, it is a pipeline that feeds into our kindergarten. And our kindergarten is what we consider the pipeline into our system for grades K through 12. So that's very important. So another thing that I wanted to highlight is that you will see for kindergarten between last year and this year, we were getting about 50% of the kindergarten students that we lost between 2019-20 and 2021, of course, because of the pandemic. So we have seen some recovery in our kindergarten, and that's important just because of what that means for a child, for instruction, and what that means for children coming into our district and our system. We hope that trend continues as we continue to go into next year, and we're going to make sure that we engage our community to make every effort to make sure that our families are served at the kindergarten level. The other thing that we do want to point out that we saw a slight recovery of our first grade cohort this year. So you'll see that for first grade, while we were up a little bit, the thing about that is that, and what I'm comparing to is like last year, we had 2,709 students that were in kindergarten. That cohort progresses up. So that 2,709, became 2,848 for our first grade, which means that we got some of our students back that weren't with us during the kindergarten year. Their parents made different choices. So that is a slight recovery. We hope for more, and we're going to continue to engage those families to get some of those students back in our district. The other thing I want to highlight is the sixth grade. We did see a loss at sixth grade. Sixth grade, as the board knows, is a break point. That means it's for most of our elementary schools. So our K-5 schools, when sixth grade choices are being made by families, sometimes they choose our schools and sometimes they don't. Historically, what we have seen in our district is this is a break point where families sometimes make other choices for their children. But here's the interesting point about that. At grade 9, you see that ninth grade, we made a gain. Families may make a different choice for grades 6 through 8, but then they tend to come back to our district for high school. And that's because of our programs and all that we have to offer families at those grade levels. So we saw a gain at ninth grade, but we also saw some notable gain at our other grade levels as well. And so those are kind of the highlights of what our enrollment looked like and observations we've made about where we've gained, where we saw minor gains and where we saw large gains. Again, Dr. Trujillo highlighted some of these in his opening remarks. As I transition to the next slide, I want to make the point one more time. I was just talking about enrollment on the 40th day, and we looked at that grade level by grade level and some of the highlights that related to that. Now we're talking about the average daily membership. That gets into the FTE averaging across the first 100 days. Ultimately, this right now is looking at it as of day 40, and you'll see when I look at the actual line that refers to this school year that we actually had a few more days than that were actually represented in our data that built this chart. So what I want to ask the board to look at is a couple of things here. Number one, if you'll notice there's 5 years of data here, starting at the top. That top line goes all the way back to 2718. Notice that while our enrollment has seen a decline each year, one of the things that holds true in our enrollment trends is the shape of that line. That's how we know that 40th day tends to be our peak day. We also know from 40th day to 100th day, we tend to see a gradual decline in our enrollment. And you see that in the shape of the line in each case, including the yellow line that's primarily at the bottom that represented last school year. Here's the point I want to note. The light blue line at the bottom that's intersecting with that yellow line is this school year. So at the time we built this chart with data that was reconciled, we had out to what looks like to be about the 56th day. One of the things that we've noticed in our data is that we had some things occur between first quarter and second quarter changeover. So here's some highlights that we wanted to make the board aware of. We had 286 students that withdrew the last day of the first quarter. The quarter changeover is when parents tend to make choices for a myriad of reasons. And then since the second quarter start, we had, at the time that this chart was put together, 488 new enrollments in our district. And we also saw 350 re-enrollments in our district, which meant that perhaps families that didn't necessarily come back to us at the beginning of the school year came back to us at second quarter. What that results in is that uptick in that line, as you see the trajectory of that line and see it go up right at the quarter, whereas normally you see that little blip that goes down at the change over the quarter and then a gradual trend down. So this is something that's a little different. As we know, last year's enrollment was different in every aspect, but this year, as we watched and we opened our schools up and saw some of the things we expected, this is something that is a little bit different. So with those number of students that came in, at second quarter, we also saw 369 student withdrawals. Again, families making choices. But what this means is that we had a net increase of almost 500 students since the start of the second quarter. Now, because that's not the normal shape of the line and the normal behavior of enrollment in our district, we need to cautiously watch the overall trend of the line. All things being equal, the line normally follows the shape that you see for the other 4 years. So we're certainly going to keep an eye on that. Remember, this is not 100th day yet. That's out after the flip of the calendar year, and we will come back to the board in February to actually look where we landed with 100th day, and then we will see at that time what this trend line actually did. So with that update on average daily membership, one other comment I want to make is if you look at that blue line and you look at the yellow line where that blue line stops, the difference between those two lines is the difference of our enrollment increase this year versus where we were last year at the same time. And you'll notice at about the down tip, right around 40th day, we were a little over 100 students different there. So somewhere in the 120 range, but we've seen that trend up. We're just going to have to watch that. So with that update on ADM, I'm going to now transition it over to Christina Grabowski, and she will update the governing board on our Enrollment Ambassador program. Christina?
Thank you. Good evening, Dr. Trujillo, governing board members. Our Enrollment Ambassador program began in May of 2021. We currently have 5 enrollment ambassadors. 1 is assigned to each one of the regions. And so the goal is for these enrollment ambassadors to give families that exceptional customer service. So we want to see that blue line continue to grow and grow and grow, and so that we are attracting new families, and also we are keeping the families that are currently enrolled. And so part of the onboarding for the enrollment ambassadors, in order to assist families to the best of their abilities, they needed training. And so we did set up training with the various departments so that when a parent asks a specific question, that they are going to have the answers at their fingertips. All of those trainings were recorded so they can go back if they need a refresher on any of the items. We also did bring in a third-party vendor. So we had CASA K-12 come in from Tennessee. And so that allowed the ambassadors to create a customer service plan moving forward. And during that training, we also had members of the communications department, family and community outreach, as well as dropout prevention, because we knew we all needed to work as a team in order to keep our families and also to attract new families to TUSD. Next slide, please. So the focus is for new families. So the ambassadors are supporting new families. They are required to contact the new families, and that's either by a personal phone call or via email. And so they do that on the initial contact, and they're also required to do it every quarter. And so the Synergy team did create reports for the ambassadors so that they can track all of their contacts as well as comments. And so we can pull up reports, see how many they have contacted, what kind of comments are being left. And the nice thing is that school staff can also see the contacts so that they know that families are being contacted by the ambassadors. They did conduct a survey towards the end of first quarter in order to do that quarterly contact, and the results were 4.28 out of 5. So on general, families are satisfied with USD, and one of the comments that they do make is that they're getting personal service. So getting that phone call from an ambassador, they really do appreciate that. And so now that open enrollment has started for school year 22-23, they have a specific email assigned to them And so they are assisting families with going through and creating parent view accounts and registering for school year 22-23. They are also going through and working on withdrawn students. And so they are covering those students that we know they went somewhere else or that we don't necessarily know where they went. And so we're going to make sure that we do not cross over into the dropout prevention so that we're not double contacting families. And so they're asking these families, is there a way we can get back into TUSD? Obviously, if they have moved to a different state or in a different part of Arizona, it may be hard for them to come back. But if a family is still within the region, we are asking them, how can we actually get them back? And again, the Synergy team did create a report for them so that if the family says, well, it's due to this, if you get this, then we'll come back, so that the ambassadors can go through and recontact those families when we have what they need back. And then customer service, they did go through using some of the information from the case of K-12 training. They created a professional development that they provided on PD Day to all office staff. So that was office managers, those are the attendance techs, the registrars, some of the finance managers were there, so that because we are in enrollment period for next school year, that they can provide superior customer service and we can keep those families. And they're also assisting Mike Dunn with going through and having lookalikes, and so that job-alikes meetings so that they can figure out what's happening within their region. And then they're also participating in some of the events that are happening, which Leslie will talk about in the next slide.
Thanks, Christina. Jean, next slide. So for open enrollment and for registration, so far this year we've already done 5 different events, starting back in July, where we were looking for registration for this year. And then up until last week, where we had our November 3rd school choice program for Magnet and all of our other programs. That was last week at the Children's Museum. We had approximately 100 families. We do families, not number of people, so that we could kind of count for the 2.5 hours we were there. The museum was very busy, and all the schools and different programs that were there were rapidly talking to people. Plus, we had the enrollment ambassadors there, which was great because they were helping people put applications together or register directly for their next school year right on site. So that was wonderful. We also have been doing TV and radio advertising, both in English and Spanish. We have print advertising, promoting things on social media, through our district websites, and of course emails and robocalls. On the right side, you see a couple of the ads that we've used. Beginning of the school year, we were using the blue ad, which was really talking about what's happening this year. And now that we're looking for next school year, the advertising has gone to a black, red, and yellow look, so big and bold. And then of course we had our Magnet and school choice fair at the bottom. Next slide. Part of what we did this year was really look at how our website process works to get people to engage and register for next year. So these next couple of slides are to quickly walk through that. On your left side is the homepage of the district website. You see the black, red, and yellow ad that they would click. When they click, they end up at the top of the right side. Which really is different this year because it breaks out and helps the family identify the type of enrollment person they are. So are they continuing with TUSD? Are they new to TUSD? Or are they changing schools? So this helps them walk through the steps that they have. One of the other things that we added this year was a selection guide tool, which is at the bottom. So the family would pick their grade and then would populate all the different schools that would be available to them, whether they're an application school or a green light school. And then if they choose a specific school, it then tells them exactly the steps they need to do to enroll or apply for that school. Working with the enrollment ambassadors, we feel like these are really good steps to help our families, better understand their options, but also really not double enroll in various schools without understanding where they're going. Next slide. This is the same information, but for a school. So as you can see on the school side, again, we have the enroll in our school today, black, red, and yellow ad. And then if they were to click on that, then this is school specific. So it tells the parent, are they continuing? Are they a new student? Are they joining their school, so they're new? Or are they changing schools, which means that they're leaving their school to go to another TUSD school. So they could look at what their options are there. Again, the enrollment ambassador's direct contact information is on there. And this page is customized for whether they're an application school or they're a green light school, of which they could register at any point starting on November 1st. Next slide. Or maybe not.
I think we're good, Leslie. And
We're having a little
the next slide is just really
Some of the
continuing
ads.
with our open enrollment for 22-23, and then supporting all the different campaigns and events. We're about to head into the high season, certainly when we get back from the Christmas or the winter break.
Yeah.
So I just want to compliment all of the hard work that our communications team has done in this area. And with that, it's governing board questions.
Any questions, board members? Thank you for the presentation. I think it was pretty thorough. The only thing I would say is that the pre-K issue, when I went and visited Shoemaker, the issue isn't capacity of the district. It is capacity of the district. It isn't the location as far as funding. It isn't site capacity. It's staffing.
Absolutely.
So that's the biggest issue. We have a 700, and this was a month ago, so it could be longer, a 700 student wait, and we have the capacity for more preschool programs. It is really, I think, a wage issue. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? And this is a information item. Yep.
That's
All right.
correct.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much for the presentation. So now we are back on the agenda, and we are at consent agenda. Dr. Trujillo.
Yes, President Grijalva, board members, I'd like to recommend for your consideration the approval of consent agenda items 5.2 through 5.12 as noted.
Thank you. Can I have a motion, board members?
I'll move.
I'll second. Thank you. So Ms. Luna Rose moved the item, Ms. Count seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes unanimously. Now we're on 6.1, administrative appointments. Director of Human Resources, Dr. Trujillo.
Yes, President Grijalva, members of the governing board, we are looking tonight to make a recommendation to fill the long vacant Director for Human Resources position. Tonight's candidate, he's been with us for about a year, but prior to that, he has extensive experience working in human resources leadership roles back in Minnesota, land of 10,000 lakes, and some human resources work and management work in beautiful Vancouver, British Columbia. He has done an outstanding job for us over the last year, largely as our main administrative contact person in HR, facilitating all of our principal hiring processes and selection processes, namely the community forums that we now do. So tonight, we do proudly recommend Mr. Christopher McNeely for your consideration as Director for Human Resources.
Thank you. I'll move the item.
I'll second.
So I moved the item and Ms. Count seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes unanimously. Is Mr. McNeely available?
Mr. McNeely, welcome. Congratulations. Would you like to just say a few words?
Thank you, Dr. Trujillo. I'm really honored to have the opportunity to continue to support the good work that our human resources teams do to serve our students, staff, and the community. So thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Item 6.2, agreement with Craig Douglas Homes LLC for the purchase of the vacant parcel located on the northeast corner of Lloyd Bush Drive and Ironwood Hills Drive with authorization for operations program manager to execute the agreement. Dr. Trujillo.
Yes, President Grijalva, board members, I'd like to welcome Mr. Nodine to walk us through this item. We do have an offer on this particular property. Mr. Nodine.
President Grijalva, members of the board, Dr. Trujillo, council, staff, I want to just give you a little bit of information about the property first, and then talk about the offers that we received. This is Lloyd Bush and Ironwood Hills, Ironwood Hill Drive. It's 19.8 acres. It was originally planned as a middle school, but we obviously don't need a middle school in that area. It's on Ironwood Hill Road, which is about 2 miles west of Silver Bell Road on the Grant Road alignment. It's a relatively level parcel of high ground. It's north of Ironwood Hill Drive between Peter Seward on the east and Lloyd Bush Drive on the west. It's property that's zoned CR1, which means single family homes at a density of 1.2 homes per acre, or basically 1 unit per acre. And it matches all the surrounding zoning. That's the same zoning. And most of the lots around the site have been developed with that zoning, except for 3 vacant lots to the west. The largest of those lots is actually being developed for 4 single-family homes by Craig Douglas, LLC, the ones who made an offer on this land. Being on high ground, it's out of the floodplain, and the views from it are good. There's a small drainage on the site, but there are no designated conservation areas or riparian habitat on the site. The vegetation is upland desert, bursage, cholla, scattered palo verde, hackberry, those types of plants. And we did receive 4 offers. The offer of $1.2 million was made by Craig Douglas, LLC, and it is above the appraised value, and it's well above the other offers. Craig Douglas, LLC is a local builder with 10 homes that are currently under construction, 18 in the planning stages. They've actually already built one just west of the property on Lloyd Bush Drive, and they have 4 more planned, again, just to the west of the site. So they know the neighborhood well. The principals of the company are Alan Murdoch, Michael Rhodes, and Dr. David Lappin. They've provided proof of funds, and they've verified that through the CFO of the Bank of the West. And I want to point out that the offer, as shown in your packet, provides a very quick closing because the buyer intends to use the existing zoning to build single-family homes, really similar to the surrounding neighborhood. And I'm here for any questions.
Okay, board members, questions? Can I get Ms. I'm sorry, Ms. Shaw.
Thank you, Ms. Grijalva. Mr. Nodine, do you have an aerial view of the property available for us to see?
Sure. Let me... Gene, if you can enable the screenshotting capability for Mr. Nodine, that would be great.
Yeah, it'll take a minute because I did close it down.
Screen sharing is available.
Any other questions while we're waiting for that? Okay.
I have a question I could
Go ahead.
follow
Ms.
up
Shaw.
with that. I would like to see it just to see what is in the area. I believe you said it was around 19 acres of undeveloped land. Yeah. And so like, my main concern is that this parcel has become sanctuary for the wildlife in the area. And I fear that, if we just sell it to the developer who's developing to the west of this parcel as well, that all of the animals living in that area, and maybe even some humans, might have to find another place to go. The undeveloped land is just becoming few and far between. And, $1 million is nice, but, what's $1 million to TUSD?
Okay. Well, let me. It's opening up the picture now.
Thank you.
Brian, I've got it up. If you want, I can screen share.
Do you have that one that says neighborhood context?
I have the one, just the aerial views.
Yeah, that'll be fine.
Just point me to which slide you think you want to start with.
Okay. All right. Let's go to the one that's the third one, the next one. That shows it the best. Okay. So what we see here is a development mostly around it. They're 1 acre lots. Some of them are a little bit bigger, but the zoning is all for 1 acres. You can see that on the west side where it curves to the west, going north where it curves to the west, you can see some vacant lots right under the sign that says neighborhood context. That's actually the 4 lots that's being developed now by Craig Douglas LLC. And then further to the west, there's actually some rental units that, those that have been, they're probably grandfathered because they don't meet the current zoning, but they've been there a long time. So that's really the neighborhood as it is.
Is there, can you
And this, yep.
Excuse me.
Do you have a follow-up question, Michelle?
Oh, I was wondering if you could, if that one was more zoomed out or zoomed in. I think the next slide is
the flood map from FEMA.
Okay. Yeah, I just.
And that shows what the property looks like. The picture is taken, the picture on the upper right, upper left, I should say, is taken from the north west corner of the site, looking across the site to the southeast. And all of them are the same. They're taken diagonally across the site from its corners. So that gives you a feeling. And the one in the middle is just looking from Peter Seward Drive on the east, directly across the site toward the Tucson Mountains.
Okay, thank you for taking time to show us that. I think it's, gives a significant picture about how important that land is, surrounded by a bunch of other developments. There's definitely wildlife, that use that spot probably as refuge, and so personally I would prefer to leave it undeveloped so it can remain as a sanctuary for wildlife and native plants.
Dr. Trujillo, can you go to slide 4 that shows the FEMA map, the flood map? Is there a water source here? I know that this is in the floodplain, but is there, because I know it's in higher ground, I'm wondering if there is any water source nearby.
When you say water source, you mean any
just,
kind of drainages?
Yeah,
going
any
through
kind
it?
of drainage, or if there's, because it says a minimal flood hazard, but it is.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
What you can see there is the floodplain is away from the site. Probably that's about 50 feet at the closest point, and about 500 feet at the 400 feet at the farthest point. So it basically this is up above that, and then it slopes down into the Camino de Oeste wash, where those homes are to the north.
Okay.
So this is well above the floodplain. There is a small drainage on the property that runs diagonally from the west side. You can kind of see it there, diagonally from the west side to the northeast corner. But it's really only about 1 foot to 2 feet wide. So it's a really small drainage. And actually, it starts right off the property to the west.
And this area, if above the FEMA flood map, Is that the area in the other map that is currently under development? Like just the little add-on that says FEMA flood map above that. Is that the same area that is currently under development?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
That's the area that's currently, it doesn't, it's an old map. There are actually 3 homes in there already, another 4 planned, and probably 2 more coming because there's 2 1-acre lots in there that are still vacant.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any other questions of Mr. Nodine?
Yeah, just real quickly.
Go ahead, Ms. Luna Rose.
Hi, Mr. Nodine. I pulled it up on Google Maps. So this is north of Painted Hills Drive. Is that my understanding? I'm trying to just get a visual.
North of Ironwood. Yes, it actually, you're right. That's Painted Hills that comes in on the south side.
Okay.
It's right where Ironwood Hills and Painted Hills meet, I believe.
Okay, yeah.
No, it's actually west. Painted Hills, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, yeah.
That's a private development to the south.
Yeah.
Painted Hills is further to the east.
Right. But still in the same vicinity. Okay, I just needed a visual. Thank you.
Okay, so this is an item on action. Do we have any motion?
I'll move.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Counts, move the item. I'll second for sake of discussion. Any additional discussion, board members? Can I ask for a roll call vote, please?
Dr. Trujillo?
Aye.
Ms. Luna Rose?
No.
Ms. Shaw?
No.
Ms. Counts?
Yes?
Ms. Grijalva?
No. Item fails 3-2 with Dr. Ravi and Ms. Counts not voting in. Voting no. Thank you, Mr. Nodine.
Okay, you're welcome.
All right, thank you. So item 6.3 is appointment of governing board ex officio member to the TUSD audit committee. This is a board member item. So board members, anyone interested in serving on the TUSD audit committee and moving themselves?
Could you talk about the meeting times?
Dr. Trujillo, do you have meeting times available?
Yes, I'm going to turn it over to, I'll turn it over to Mrs. Pena or Ms. Gutierrez. They are managers of the audit committee calendar. Can we give a brief overview, either one of you, on the frequency in which audit committee meets and the specific starting times? I believe, Mr. Ross, you could do that as well as a regular attendee.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Trujillo. The board fairly recently said the audit committee needed to meet quarterly. It is usually on Friday afternoons starting at 2. And the last meeting went about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours.
So quarterly, 4 times a year?
Yes.
Okay.
That hasn't gone through a whole cycle, so I don't know if the committee will add any meetings, but that's what the minimum number that the board voted on.
Okay. All right, given that information, any takers?
Ms. Grijalva?
Yes, Ms. Luna Rose.
Unless Ms. Shaw is interested, I'd be happy to sit on the committee, but I'd like to defer to her first if she's wanting to sit in.
That's fine with me, Ms. Lynn-Rose, if you would like to sit on the audit committee.
Okay. Do you want to nominate her?
I will nominate you.
I will second.
Oh, thank you.
I'm glad you guys volunteered because I would have done it. But I do think it's helpful. I think it's good information to be a part of. And the other thing is that if it becomes too time consuming or it just doesn't end up fitting into your schedule, Ms. Luna Rose, feel free to come back to the board and we can see if maybe we can split it up. I mean, I think that's okay too.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And so we have a motion. Ms. Shaw moved the item and I seconded to have Ms. Luna Rose serve as the governing board ex officio member to the TUSD audit committee. Any additional discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Item passes unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Luna Rose.
You're welcome.
All right, item 6.4, Governing Board Policy BEDB. This is the board meeting agenda. I requested that this be revised because when I took over the position as president, I realized that what we were doing in practice, it wasn't matching our policy, and our policy was pretty prescriptive. And so if you, Mr. Ross, did you want to review what changes you made? I mean, the track changes are pretty obvious there on the item, but.
Yes, and this is second read, so the board reviewed this before, and we have received no comments since it was posted more than 4 weeks ago. And as you can see, the changes there in the track changes just kind of show the request that you want the practice to be, at least your vision of the practice to be. So.
It's just what we're doing in the actual meeting is reflected in the agenda or in the policy.
And then those changes would be transferred over to board docs titles, hopefully, so that everything matches up.
And I think they're pretty. They already look that way to me. I don't think it's any substantive changes. It's just matching up our policy to what we actually do. Any questions? Can I get a motion? I'll move the item.
I'll second.
Thank you. So I move the item. Ms. Luna Rose seconds. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Item passes unanimously. So we have already addressed 7.1. Now we're at 7.2, TUSD transportation update, October 26th through November 9th. I know you addressed some of this in your superintendent's report, Dr. Trujillo, but.
Yes, this is just an update on our driver retention and recruitment, and a little bit more about routes that have been updated since we last met. Let's welcome our Director for Transportation, Ms. Martha Zamora.
Good evening, Dr. Trujillo, President Grijalva, members of the board. I'm here with a quick update on transportation status. Next page, please. Our agenda today covers human resources analyst position, driver capacity, contracted services, students served, and hubs and routes. And I want to let you know that I'm extremely excited that we are in the process of hiring for a human resources analyst position. This position will focus 100% on recruiting and hiring drivers, which is a much needed need in transportation. We see the number of applications that come in on a weekly basis. We'll get 7 applications in a few days, and then all of a sudden we'll go many days without applications coming in. So this position will allow us to have somebody that's 100% dedicated on just recruiting and hiring drivers. Next page, please. So driver capacity, since the last time we met, I'm pleased to announce that we have an additional 5 drivers on the road, which our entire department feels as we bring one more driver, the relief. Most of our supervisors have been driving all the time, so we're seeing some relief from that. And then we have an additional 5 that have completed the training and should be on the road any day now. Next, please. Last we met, you asked information on our contracted services. Here's a list of the vendors that we deal with. And the total number of students that we currently have contracted out are 315. From the list that we have here, with other than Handicar and Comtrans, all the other vendors at one point or another have come and told us that they are unable to cover a route or have taken back a route, and then a few weeks later they will take it back for the same situation that we're in, where they don't have drivers. So they will either have drivers that are calling in sick, or someone that has quit within their area, and that's where that comes back and forth. We went back and reviewed every single one of them, but up to date, Handicar has been by far the one vendor that we've been able to rely on. They were the one vendor that we dealt with in previous years, and as being one of our main partners. Prior to COVID, they used to cover about 300 students, and as you see the numbers here, right now they're only able to cover about 100. They're also working on bringing in more people. So as they have more availability, we are sending more students their way. Next page, please. And then here's an updated count of students that are routed. We've had a little bit of a difference from the last show that we had. And the numbers have just increased. We continue to route students on a daily basis as they come in, prioritizing Exit and McKinney-Vento. Next slide, please. And here is a list of hubs and routes. The numbers are about the same. We'll add a hub here and then we'll remove one there, so they end up being the same number. But we are working at trying to be as efficient as possible by removing stops where students are not using, and then we're utilizing that space or that time to add additional routes. Next slide, please. And that concludes my presentation. If you guys have any questions.
Any questions, board members? Thank you for the update. It's good to see it's good to see the progress, and I know we're all glad to see it.
I'm excited. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is we addressed 7.3, so now we're on 7.4, establishment of a DAPE advisory committee. Dr. Trujillo.
Yes, tonight I'd like to recommend for the governing board's consideration, much like we've done in transportation with the assembly of a transportation advisory committee that I work with. I'd like to propose tonight the establishment of a DAPE advisory committee that will meet with the administration, primarily composed of parents and teachers and those that work directly in the DAPE program, so that we can talk about proposals to enhance and strengthen and improve DAPE services for students. The purpose of this committee would be forward-thinking, would be to plan the future of DAPE, to address some of the long-standing issues that have existed with DAPE programming even prior to COVID-19. We struggled with transportation issues, and primarily we've struggled with students not having work once they're assigned to DAPE. So these are issues that we can not only take on in the advisory committee, but we can also start planning for the future of DAPE and, of course, the improvement of services. So this is just our recommendation here.
Dr. Trujillo, I know that this was brought up before, and I asked if we could make it a broader committee of alternative education programs in the district versus just DAPE.
Yeah, we can.
Some of our, and I'm totally open if, you know, there's a very specific goal in mind for this, but I do think that, you know, we utilize a lot of resources into Project More. We utilize a lot of resources into TAP and some of our other, some of our intervention programs, the tutoring programs, and it might be too much for this, but I do think that, you know, coordinating a lot of those dropout prevention services, coordinating those programs, it would be really, you know, having a coordinated effort at the district level, I think would be really helpful.
Yeah, DAPE is a slice of the overall pie of alternative ed, right? You've got TAP, you've got the Catalina online learning experience, you've got Project More, and then you have dropout prevention services that we received the state grant in our whole department. So, I mean, it's certainly a consideration we can certainly look at in expanding the scope of the work here.
And if this is specific for like a short-term sort of figure out where we're going, but I do foresee this being a larger kind of advisory committee. Any other comment? Ms. Shaw, did you want to address that?
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Grijalva. Although I do think it's, you know, important that all of these programs that kind of complement each other are strengthened and figure out a way for them to work together, I worry that throwing a bunch of different elements into this advisory committee will convolute the issues that need to be addressed right now with DAPE. And so I don't think at this point it would be wise to, you know, add in different things into this advisory committee. I think first and foremost we have to address the issues with DAPE.
I understand that, and I think that perhaps Dr. Trujillo, once the pressing issues with DAPE have been addressed, are you foreseeing this being a short-term advisory committee, or
Well, we certainly wanted to meet indefinitely right now until we can clear up some of the concerns that are out there about date. And then my hope is that we also explore proposals and ideas to improve services at date. I don't view this committee as a body that's going to sit and listen to us point by point address everything that's been said about DAPE. I think bigger than that. I think we need to be looking at how do we make services the best that they can be for students assigned there. Now, how long that's going to take, I don't know, but I certainly think we need to get one started. I think it'll increase transparency, and that it also gives the administration an opportunity to present directly to our stakeholders about DAPE programming.
Okay, and then if you could just, through your communications, maybe after the committee's established, let us know who the committee members are in maybe 3 months, like quarterly, sort of give us a little update. And once, if there aren't pressing issues, maybe we can revisit the direction of
Absolutely.
the advisory committee.
Absolutely. We can bring it back. We can give you updates just like we do with transportation.
Okay, great. No, I mean, not here in the board meeting, just, we can do that eventually, but I'd just like to, once you have an advisory committee established, I'd like to know, I think we'd all like to know who's on that committee.
Absolutely.
And that would just be your government,
when we
your
meet to review the
communications to the board.
agendas. Yep, absolutely.
All right, any other questions? Okay. And this is a study action, but does it require board vote if it's a superintendent's committee?
No, it does not.
Okay.
This is just action just in the case any governing board member had any reservations or did not want the administration to proceed.
Okay. All right, thank you. 7.5, consideration of approval of a budget advisory committee charter. Dr. Trujillo.
Yes, I will turn this over to Dr. Gravoy-Shaw, and also I don't know if we have our chair of the BAC on here this evening, Mr. Ricky Hernandez. But this is there he is, also a TUSD parent. Happy to have him here to speak to a prospective charter for the newly established Budget Advisory Committee.
Mr. Hernandez, Dr. Ravi.
Yep, I'll defer to Mr. Hernandez. Go ahead.
There you go.
So, I just real briefly, so first of all, thank you again for having me tonight. So, President Grijalva, the charter before you is very similar to the charters that have been put together for the other advisory committees that have been put together by the governing board. We made sure to have specific items that are related to the charge that the governing board wanted to make sure to have for the budget advisory committee, and followed the requirements that were developed and approved by the governing board back in the summer. The entire committee reviewed this as part of its actually very first meeting in September, and it was unanimously approved to recommend to the governing board. So unless there are specific questions, this is the entirety of the charter, and I hope you've had time to review it. Like I mentioned before, the entire committee had no comments, concerns. It was unanimously approved, and so we're putting it before you for your approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Ravi, did you want to add anything?
No, this really summarizes what we approved, I think, back in March or April when we first created the committee, and just puts it in the format aligned with the other committees that we have.
Okay, board members, any questions?
Just, has the board committee membership stayed the same? Okay.
All right. Any, can I get a...
I'll move the item.
Okay, thank you, Dr.
I'll
Ravi.
second.
Okay, so I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Item passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Hernandez, for hanging on with us.
Thank you, everybody.
Appreciate that.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Ricky.
All right. Item 7.6, this is Governing Board Policy KHB, Advertising in Schools. Dr. Trujillo or Mr. Ross?
Yes, I'm going to turn this over to our General Counsel, Mr. Ross, who will probably be taking lead on the next 3 items that are all policy related. So take it away, Mr. Ross.
Thank you, Dr. Trujillo, and good evening again, board members. So this is something that, this policy for advertising is something that has been, probably needs to have been done for quite a while. We have several policies that kind of hint around at advertising. We have promotional displays in schools, We have bus advertising, which was a specific statutory provision, but we don't have anything that addresses the authority for schools or the district to do advertising in any other way. It's happening out there. As is stated in the board agenda item, it is happening, but it's kind of the Wild West out there. There are no rules. What this policy would do is authorize that, and then the superintendent would be responsible for monitoring that and creating specific procedural regulations for it. The statute allows for advertising as long as it kind of meets the same sort of standards as bus ads. It has to be age appropriate, doesn't promote any substance that's illegal for minors, such as alcohol, tobacco, or drugs, and complies with the state sex education policy of abstinence. That's the statutory requirement. But we can create other requirements as well. What I would envision for this, if the board adopts the policy, is the regulation would include more standards, maybe some more guidance on that, maybe some examples, and also have a sample advertising contract that that schools and departments would need to use within the advertising arrangement.
So, I do have a question regarding the last paragraph on the second page, the responsibilities. TUSD shall establish an advertisement fund that is composed of revenues from the sale of advertising. I know that some of our schools do advertising for different events. We'll put up banners around, the fence on, our games, that kind of thing. And those revenues have been staying on campus. Could this be seen as a change?
I would not recommend that it change. If a school generates that revenue, just like rental income, there should be maybe some provision for, for administration of, if there's a committee or a group that's working on advertising review, a small amount for that. But to me, whoever is generating the revenue should keep if not all of it, most of it.
So should we have something explicit for that to say, except for, school site advertising, or, because you have advertising that's happening for like programs for, Tucson High has their performance and their playbill will have advertisement. That advertising stays with that department. And so I do think that we have to have some sort of asterisk line item in here to specifically state that those funds, that there's no change in those funds, that they stay with the school site.
And I'd be happy to put in specific language in there that says that whichever site generates the revenue, that the revenue remains in that site. Just that by statute, there is a fund. It can be divided up. Here's the sub fund for advertising for Sabino, and there's under that advertising fund, there's also a sub fund for Sechrist. But I'll be happy to include language that specifically states in the policy that whoever's generating the revenue, whichever site is generating the revenue, it stays there.
And I think like for the buses and all of that, I mean, if it's a district-wide, if anything that is distributed district-wide there would be a district-wide fund versus school site-specific fund. Some sort of language like that would be helpful. Any other questions?
And I believe I did have language like that in my draft regulation, but I can move that into this policy for the next.
I just think that could be, someone could read that and say, oh, great, why would we push for advertising if it's not going to stay here? Anyway, or, sponsors for different events will get a billing in the website or something like that. Any questions about this? So we want to go ahead and just study this item, and Mr. Ross, can you bring this back with the addition of that language?
Certainly.
Okay. All right. And this is a first read, so it's pretty standard for us to not do any major action unless we want to. Okay, 7.7, Governing Board Policy ACA, Sexual Harassment Revisions. Mr. Ross?
So thank you. Last board meeting, you took a look at the Title IX policy, ACAA, sexual harassment. This is kind of a companion piece to it. So we have, as you remember, Title IX under the federal regulations has a somewhat narrow and complex scheme for dealing with Title IX sexual harassment, which is for sexual harassment of students mainly. This is the broader sexual harassment policy for employees under Title VII, which is enforced by the EEOC. And what this policy change would do is basically say, this is the policy that you look at with its broader definitions and lower standard for regular Title VII sexual harassment. If it's a student, it's a kind of a clear cross-reference to go look at Title IX. Once we have both of these policies in place, the big thing is to train the whole organization on these, because the Title IX change was a big one, and we'll have a lot to do with that over the next year. But basically this change is, we didn't change any of the definitions here. We just want to make sure that if you're looking for, that this policy says if you're looking for sexual harassment procedures for students, then you should look at ACAA Title IX.
Okay. Any questions, board members? Do we want to move this, since it's really just the red line, do we want to move this to adopt it, or do we want to put it out for public comment and go through our normal procedure? Do we want to wait and take action next board meeting? Don't see a lot of. So if we move the item now, we can put it out to the process. It's that 4-week process. It'll come back at our upcoming board meeting. We can just look it over because it is a first read. There's not a lot of changes other than adding that piece in, the red line on the first.
I'll move it.
First page. Okay. I'll second for sake of discussion. So Ms. Luna Rose moved the item. I seconded. Any additional? Go ahead.
I'm sorry, we moved the item for public comment then?
Yes.
Okay.
So we move it forward through the normal process. I mean, unless we specifically say as a board, we're just going to adopt it right away and it just becomes policy, it would go through that standard practice. All right. Any other comments or questions? All right. Let's have a motion in a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Item passes unanimously, 4-0. Now we're at 7.8, Governing Board Policy, IIEA, High School Subjects Taken in 7th and 8th Grades, first reading. This is a revision. Mr. Ross.
Thank you, board members. I believe we have Ms. Sandoval-Taylor available for discussion here, maybe other folks in the department. But this revision, just in brief, and I'm sure that Pat can fill in the details. But this policy goes way back to when we had junior high instead of middle schools, and what this would do is add 6th grade to the ability for students who have qualifying courses to get high school credit down to 6th grade instead of just 7th and 8th, as the policy currently says.
So anything taken in middle school?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'll just say the administration is fully supportive of this policy. It's consistent with what we do with 7th and 8th grade, so we look forward to hopefully the board supporting it.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions? Yes.
So
Dr. Rami.
question. So President Grijalva, would it be appropriate, since this is not really a controversial change, or just kind of updating this, to adopt this without going through the normal process?
Yes. If that's the board's wish, then we can do that.
All right. I'll move to do that then.
Okay, do you want to go ahead and move this item to go straight to just implementation and not
Yes.
through the public process? Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Dr. Robbie and a second by Ms. Luna Rose. It makes sense to me, it's middle school.
Yes.
There should be a period, I think, after provider at the last sentence. But that's it. Since we're going to make the change, we might as well add a period there. Okay, any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes unanimously, 4-0. We have addressed 8.1. Now we're on 8.2, fiscal year 22 expenditure update, October 2021. Dr. Trujillo.
Yes, the last item of the evening, from our perspective, from the staff, is the expenditure update. As always, I'd like to welcome Ms. Weatherless for this month, or for the month of October's update.
Thank you, Dr. Trujillo. Good evening, President Grijalva, members of the Governing Board, Council Ross, and staff. I'm bringing you the expenditure update for October. We can go ahead and advance to the next slide. I feel like we're just here. We just did September not too long ago. There's not a whole lot to talk about as far as variances go. The only thing that I'm going to point out here tonight is on M&O. In the past 2 months that I've done the expenditure update, you've seen that number probably less than $1 million, and it's trending upward. So what you should start anticipate seeing is as we get through this year, a lot of the trouble we're having in recruiting, and we have a lot of vacant positions, we have to start seeing how much of those vacancies will actually be expended by the end of the year and what we will end up with. Otherwise, in all of the other funding sources, they're pretty stable. They're trending and staying from month to month what we anticipated. If you go to the next slide, you'll see the breakdown of M&O and capital regarding DSEG and non-DSEG. Again, the same number for M&O, not much else to cover here. If you want to advance to the next slide, this is our regular year-to-date expenditures, just broken out by funding source and by expenditure type, just how our monies are being spent so far through the month of October. 2 more slides, please. Fund balances. So fund balance, this is not budget balance. This is how much money ended up in the year, prior year by funding source. There is one red number in that screen on community schools. So what we're trending here, the number has actually decreased, or I should say the negative number has actually gotten smaller. Any kind of loss here is going to be covered by the grants that we have in our community schools area. We are anticipating that number to turn positive by the time we get to the end of the fiscal year. We'll just keep an eye on that one. Otherwise, if you look at prior months, prior years, we're trending pretty consistent. And then go ahead and advance 2 more slides. We're going into classroom spending. So the third column from the right, that's the number that we keep an eye on, is our year-to-date expenditures and how they fall in our classroom dollar report. So last month, that number was 50.7%. You can see that with each month, that instructional dollar does continue to increase. We are projecting somewhere around the 53% by the end of the year, but again, we'll keep watching that trend. And the following slide is just the cumulative chart, and following these 2 slides are just some informational items on how that classroom dollar is categorized. So does anybody have any questions?
Any questions, board members?
Okay.
I don't think
Thank
so.
you.
Thank you. Okay. Dr. Trujillo, I'm almost afraid to say it. I think we're done with the meeting.
Yes,
Right.
President Grijalva, members of the governing board, with regard to future meeting dates, we would like to propose an additional meeting, either to take place on Tuesday, November 16th, or Tuesday, November 23rd. Our start time would be 5 o'clock. We would ask for a 45-minute executive session from 5 to 5:45, and then we would ask for a 5:45 start time for the public meeting for one singular agenda item to be voted on and considered by the board, and that would be the option that the board would vote on, the direction it would give the administration to pursue compliance with what we saw tonight with the OSHA emergency temporary standard for COVID-19 testing. This would be special meeting, so we would have to build in a 20-minute call to the audience, and we are proposing that this special meeting be 100% virtual because it only is one agenda item. And in the executive session, we would be addressing the executive session items that we did not address this evening. Mr. Ross, would you like to add anything?
No, the only thing I would add is that the reason that this can't be done on the regular 7th of December meeting is that OSHA has given us until December 5th to adopt a policy, make one of the policy choices.
Okay. Dr. Trujillo, since we're not meeting again until December 7th, I just don't want to restrict you. I understand and I appreciate that you're trying to keep the meeting very focused, but if there is another issue that is pressing or some expenditure that a school would like to have and get an order in, I don't want to completely restrict it.
Okay.
It is a special meeting, and I would hope that if it's like a couple of consent agenda or something
Okay.
like that, but if we're going to meet,
Absolutely.
and there's some business that has to be done, I don't think that anyone would be opposed to it. I know it's going to be a short meeting.
Okay.
Okay. Does any board member at this point have any conflict with the 16th or the 23rd?
I have a work conflict on the 16th, but I can make the 23rd.
Okay. Any other, if we can just...
I'm available both dates.
Okay. My phone is dead, but I think I'm okay.
All right.
It died a while ago.
Will this be here in Duffy or will this be completely remote?
Complete remote is our recommendation.
So we're just going to be totally online wherever we
Yes.
are. Okay. Ms. Shaw, do you have any issue on the 23rd?
I'm good with the 23rd as well.
Okay. So based on the availability of the four of us here, I think the 23rd is the way to go. And we're not voting, obviously, but since you offer two dates and one of them is a conflict for Dr. Rabi, I think we'll be okay.
We will proceed with November 23rd at the time that we've indicated. Ms. Pena, do you want to add anything? Any other logistical details for the meeting?
We'll do the standard land acknowledgement statement as well as the pledge of allegiance, and like you addressed that we will have to have a 20-minute
I'm
call.
sorry, Yolanda, I can't hear you.
Oh.
I know, I could hear you. You were far away. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There you go.
So we will have the land acknowledgement statement as well as the Pledge of Allegiance. And then, as Dr. Trujillo stated, we will do the 20-minute call to the audience.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions or items, board members? And I mean, as usual, you can always send any agenda request items to Dr. Trujillo directly or to Yolanda, the board staff, Michelle. All right. I think that's it. Adjourn the meeting, and we'll see you on the 23rd of November.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay safe.